agenda to include Resolution 2019-118, a resolution, if you could state one more time.
A resolution providing board direction to the board president regarding Board of Estimate and Taxation, BET, staffing.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the addition, on the amendment of the agenda? Commissioner Vogel.
Question of clarification is I'm not familiar right now where the process is at. Is the purpose of this to have just a discussion of some kind, or are we providing votes of some sort to the president regarding what action should be taken?
I was hoping that we would provide direction to the board president on how they should vote on this particular issue. I believe the BET will be voting on this at their next meeting in March.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Providing with your clarification, I'm going to rule the motion out of order if your intent is to provide direction on how to cast a vote on a separate body. I think if you would like to restate your motion to provide a position on the upcoming Board of Estimate and Taxation vote, that motion would be in order. There is one representative there are 6 members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation in the city of Minneapolis. I've been sworn in by the city clerk to represent the entire city of Minneapolis on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and a motion directing somebody to take a vote in a particular way, I would rule is out of order.
How do we word it when we give direction on the maximum setting of the levy for the year? I believe it's similar to this, is it not?
In the maximum levy request, the board sends a request to the Board of Estimate and Taxation setting the levy that does not pass a resolution directing any member of the Board of Estimate and Taxation how to vote on a particular item on their agenda. So I will be ruling that motion out of order. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? Are there any other amendments to the agenda?
I guess then I would like to modify the wording to providing board direction to the board president on what position that the board as a body takes?
That motion I would also rule out of order. A motion that would be in order that I think gets to your intent is to have the Park and Recreation Board adopt a position on an administrative function of another municipal body. If you would like to frame your motion somewhere along those lines, I would consider that.
Okay, so I guess then I propose a amendment to the agenda to have a resolution providing a board position on the staffing of the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
I'll second that.
The chair is confused as to what the board direction is. So you would like to add a discussion about clarifying a board position. I'm sorry, the chair is confused.
What my intent is for us to get to a place where this policy board takes a policy position on the staffing of the BET. It's important to our independence that there be independent staff working for the BET, not working for us or working for the city specifically. So if we want to have a discussion.
Your opinion is appreciated, but the chair is confused on the intent of the motion.
I would like to have a discussion about policy direction regarding BET staffing.
There is a motion on the floor that is in order to add to the agenda a discussion item under new business to discuss potential Park and Recreation Board position on the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Yes.
Okay, so Secretary Ringgold, can you restate the motion?
President Bourne, Commissioner Musich, it would be my understanding that there would be a new discussion item. I would think it would fit under, in this case, new business regarding board position on BET staffing. It would no longer require a resolution number if it was a discussion item.
Okay. The chair is clear on the intent of the motion that there is a motion on the floor to add a discussion item around potential park board position on BET staffing. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
That motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Forney.
Yes, I'm supportive of having the discussion. First of all, I wasn't at the committee of the whole when this topic was brought up. There's a lot more information that has come out, and I think that it's a worthy thing for the board to have a better understanding of what is being discussed and the potential. So I think this is a very important thing for all of us to be fully aware of and appreciate this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Vitoff, followed by Commissioner Cogill.
Thank you, President Bourne. I just want to say that I'm supportive of this discussion because some of my colleagues asked for this to be put on the agenda at the previous meeting, and I wasn't here, and it was taken off. So I do appreciate us having the opportunity to have this discussion because it meant a great deal to some commissioners to have the discussion.
Commissioner Cogill.
Thank you, President Bourne. I'm always happy to talk about any issue. I ultimately think that this is at the discretion of the president who is on the BET, but I think it's always helpful to talk about issues that are pertinent to our board and the longevity of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I would just add one of the, just a couple points of clarification. Your colleagues on your board took a vote to remove an item from the agenda that was posted in committee. I'm very interested in having this conversation again. This was posted, this board had a public conversation at a committee of the whole meeting and had a very robust conversation, and I'm appreciative of the conversation that folks had. I am sorry that Commissioner Forney, you were absent for that meeting and missed that part of the discussion. I'm very interested in making sure that you have an opportunity to have that discussion. That said, I am going to encourage commissioners to vote no on this amendment. One of the commitments that I was asked to make by several commissioners for this year was to, in the interest of what some commissioners called transparency, was better manage our agenda. That is a request that I've taken to heart. And there was concern by both the motion maker and the seconder of this motion that they did not like to be, I think some of their own words at different times were surprised by items that were being added to the agenda without any public discussion. I am very interested, and I will, Commissioner Forney, I will not be recognizing you. I gave the opportunity for everybody to discuss, and it is the chair's privilege to have the last comment on a subject. I am very willing to add this to a future discussion at the request of the motion maker. I will also state that there is no impending vote at the Board of Estimate and Taxation this month, so we do have another cycle to add this to the agenda. So I would encourage, out of respect for everybody on this board, that folks do not amend this agenda for the folks that were not able to be here, and I will add it to I will add a discussion item to our next cycle. Seeing no further discussion, all of those in favor of the amendment to the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The motion passes. Can I ask for a roll call vote?
Can I take a point of personal privilege?
Commissioner Musich, you may.
As the motion maker, if you will commit to a date that I will see this on a future agenda, I will withdraw this amendment to our agenda.
Secretary Ringgold, when is our next our next board meeting is on the 6th of March, is that correct?
President Bourne, our next regular meeting is on the 6th of March. We have a committee of the whole on February 27th.
I will make every effort to work with the superintendent and the deputy superintendent to include this on either the 27th or the 6th. I will not make an absolute commitment to that because oftentimes we've seen that staff have different information and they ask for agendas to be moved. But I will make every effort. I understand that having yet another discussion on this topic is a priority of some members of this board, and I want to be respectful of that. So I'll make every effort to include that as a discussion item on the 27th or the 6th.
In light of that information, I will withdraw this amendment to our agenda this evening.
The motion has been withdrawn. Is there any other discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the agenda as noticed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The agenda carries. Approval of, I think we will move on to reports of officers. Superintendent Pangora.
All right, thank you, President Warren, Commissioners. First, I'd like to just say a real thank you for yesterday's event at the Trailhead for the meet and greet. For me, it was an amazing event. I'm so appreciative, and I just want to say thank you to commissioners that were there and that couldn't make it. It was just a wonderful time, and I just want to say thank you for just a fantastic evening at the beautiful Trailhead. And someday I will get out there and I will ski. We were going to do it yesterday, but it was a little late, so yeah, it was just wonderful. A couple things I want to talk about is in the environmental management. Environmental management staff kicked off their annual part-time and seasonal staff hiring in late January. Staff have been attending job fairs, posting positions online, and sorting through lots of applications. Also, the environmental management department hires more than 80 seasonal and part-time workers on an annual basis. Positions include gardeners and naturalists at Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden, aquatic invasive species inspectors and at Minneapolis Lakes, and environmental education naturalists and water quality staff. It's pretty amazing. Interviews have begun and others remain open until filled. Check out our job tab on the NPRB website for more information and to join the amazing NPRB team. And also, so a couple more things. Will and maintain past President's Day on Monday, Friday based on weather conditions. In addition, rinks and lakes of the Isles, Loring, North Commons, Sibley, and Van Cleve will receive additional attention on Saturdays and Sundays with sweeping and additional water as needed for our rinks. That's pretty much everything for environmental. With positions now that we're hiring for, we're in the process of hiring for park agents. And we're probably looking at about 10 to 12 agents that are in process for hiring. And that believe will start sometime, I think in April, beginning of April, we'll start with that. So that's great news. Looking at recreation, golf. This is great news to hear. Play Golf Minneapolis Summit was held on the 16th, 11 to 4 o'clock p.m. at Columbia Golf Club. Attendees are able to sign up for golf leagues, purchase season passes, or player cards, and find out about what our beautiful courses have to offer. The event was free, and what was amazing was that Revenue for that day was around $73,000 in February, which is pretty incredible, so that was great news. The Teen Teamworks application process opens on March 11th, so we're very excited about that. That will begin on March 11th. Human Resources, employee surveys, HR staff have met with the City of Minneapolis, and the survey and more commencing with drafting of MPRB surveys, so that is beginning. Labor Management Committee, the annual meeting was held in January. Jennifer Ringgold and Tom Kelly were selected as the co-chairs for the 2019. Projects for 2019 include LMC Communications and Visibility, Employee Wellness, and Employee Development and Succession Planning. It's very good. Planning Division, celebrate new public artwork on 26th Avenue North. Completion of 3 new artworks by Christopher Aaron Deans, Christopher Harrison, and Esther Oseand. I probably said that wrong, so I do apologize. And a guided bus tour given by the artists to see these artworks at 3 locations at 26th Avenue North, Theodore Worth Parkway, Nellie Stone Johnson School, and Farview Park. Please note, if you want to ride the bus from location to location, please make a reservation. Monday, February 25th, and it's from 1:15 to 3 o'clock p.m. And there's more information, of course. Please contact Ann Godfrey at Minneapolis Parks, or MinneapolisMN.gov, and we'll give more information on that, of course. Plank Road Project, Plank Trails Improvements, Phase 1 is officially closed. Out as the 1-year corrective work warranty was up in 2018. Phase 2 is in process. Falwell Wading Pool and North Mississippi Regional Park Wading Pool. Currently in the process of soliciting bids on pool repairs at Falwell Wading Pool and North Mississippi Regional Park Wading Pool. The goal is for all repairs to be completed by May and June of 2019. A couple more things I'd like to touch upon. Community outreach, event highlights real quickly. The Kite Festival at Lake Harriet drew a large crowd on January 26th. Despite the extremely frigid temperatures, because we're Minnesotans, an approximate crowd of over 2,000 people enjoyed the annual event. The heated tent was a popular spot, and it consisted of projects for kids, refreshments, and live acoustic music. And the events department was just approved for $24,800 grant for the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. This will fund the August 3rd Owanami Falling Water Festival. And then the Juneteenth Committee is moving forward with planning for the 2019 event, as they have established a full board led by community members and NPR staff. And a couple of highlights, on racial equity. All staff in the Planning and Support Services Division have completed Racial Equity 101, the organization-wide racial equity training. A third of the staff in the Environmental Stewardship Division have completed the training. Recreation and External Relations will receive the training during the 4th quarter. We're doing great work there, and I'm very proud of that. And real quickly, the purpose of the training is to introduce the framework and common language for authentic dialogue about racial equity, and to create an environment which encourages such dialogue, to explore why an introduction to individual, institutional, and structural racism is critical to the definition and commitment of racial equity for MPRB. And the last thing is to introduce the training as a strategy to advance racial equity in the Minneapolis park system. So those are some of the highlights. And again, thank you for the time and for the wonderful day yesterday. I appreciate it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Bangora. Do commissioners have any questions for the superintendent or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on with the agenda. I would entertain a motion on the consent items, Resolution 2019-119 and Resolution 2019-120.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
The consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolutions 2019-119 119 through 120, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motions carry. Moving on to reports of standing committees. Chair Forney.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-116, a resolution approving the community engagement policy.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. I would now entertain a motion to refer this item back to the planning committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So
It
moved.
has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion to refer the item back to the planning committee? Commissioner Forney.
Just for clarification, there are some structural adjustments that have been requested, and that's why it's being moved back to committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Is there any further discussion on referring 2019-116 back to committee? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of referring the resolution back to committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the item has been referred back to the planning committee. Chair Vita.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-117, resolution approving amendment number 1 to the exclusive rights agreement with the City of Minneapolis and the development team led by United Properties for collaborative efforts related to creating a coordinated plan for the Upper Harbor Terminal.
Second.
Resolution 2019 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on 2019-117? Commissioner Meyer.
I was just wondering if we could get an update about if anything has changed since yesterday, because I know the city council took a vote on that and I wasn't able to follow it. So I see
Ms.
Kate
Lammers?
walking up.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. I can give you an update, although as of yet, we don't know completely what this will mean. So the City Council Committee did take a vote, but it will go on to the full council for approval of the concept plan. However, there is still a fair amount of work to be done to examine this concept. There are still a fair amount of changes that could be made. The language in the City Council concept and the amendments that went with it allow for a lot of room for exploration. So I think as we move into sort of this next stage of park design and development and everything, that we'll be able to work very well with the team on kind of exploring the site as a whole and then continue moving ahead with our job of providing parks. And I don't believe that it has any implications that would change this amendment.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Lammers. Is there any further discussion on 2019-117? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries with one abstention. Moving on to new business, I would entertain. I have 5:28. Under new business, I would entertain a motion for resolution 2019-126. Is there a motion for resolution 2019-126?
I will move resolution 2019-126.
Resolution 2019-126 is that the board accepts the donation of up to $12,000 from the Minneapolis Foundation to allow the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board representatives to attend the 2019 Cross Country World Cup in Quebec, Canada from March 21st, 25th, along with other Minnesotans to prepare for the 2020 FIS Cross Country World Cup. Further, the board authorizes Superintendent Van Gora, President Bourne, and Commissioner Vita to attend the 2019 World Cup reimburse their expenses. The resolution has been moved. Was there a second?
I will second it.
The resolution has been moved and seconded. I will be recusing myself from this discussion. I would, based on time, I would normally defer this to Commissioner Vita.
I will also be recusing myself from this discussion.
I would normally pass this to the Chair of the Admin and Finance Committee, who has also recused herself. I would ask unanimous consent to allow the Vice Chair of the Admin and Finance Committee, Vice Chair Cogill, to chair the remainder of the discussion around Resolution 2019-126. Is there unanimous consent?
Yes.
The Vice Chair Cogill.
Thank
It's
you,
5:30.
President Bourne. It is 5:30. Shall I continue?
Is there a discussion?
Oh, yes. So is there any discussion on this item? Yes, Commissioner Forney? Oh, okay. Maybe we'll just go to open time and
was
we'll
gonna
come
say go
back
to
to this
open
in a
time,
moment.
please.
Thank you very much.
5:30, it's the open time at the Minneapolis Park Board. It's the time where we take public comment from anybody, and we have a series of guidelines that we ask people to abide by. There is nobody here that is signed up to speak at open time. There is an opportunity to sign up to speak as late as 3 p.m. on the day of. So is there anybody that had intended to sign up for open time that missed? Seeing none, I do have somebody that had intended. That's okay, and considering the weather, we normally have a rule that that we have people sign up by 3 o'clock. If there is unanimous consent from this board, I would authorize giving you 2 minutes to address this board. Do I hear any objection? Hearing none. If you would come forward, you have 2 minutes to address the board. Just very brief, the guidelines that we ask. State your name and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record.
Yep.
The 2 pieces of info, we don't tolerate harassing or discriminatory information towards anyone, and we ask you to keep those in mind when you're making your comments. And we don't receive comments on pending litigation or personnel issues. If you would state your name and if you're comfortable, your address for the record, and you have 2 minutes to address the board.
Yes, my name is Conrad Zbikowski, Zbikowski, and I live at Hennepin and First Street, not far from here. I'm speaking to your commissioners tonight regarding the proposed the proposed Heritage Landing parking ramp that the Federal Reserve has proposed for a current parking lot that is not far from here, that is adjacent to their property, that they bought in April of 2018 with the intent of building additional parking on the site. As a local resident, I live right across from the Fed. I'm opposed to the 800 stall parking ramp. It is not for the zone purpose, and it doesn't follow the wraparound thing that the city has right now with its rules. In terms of the park board, there's a huge missed opportunity for connecting the riverfront to North Loop through that area. The Federal Reserve has proposed putting in a private park that's kind of just a grassy area with some water retention ponds and whatnot. But I know my time is kind of coming up. But anyway, what I wanted to say is I would encourage you to look at this proposal before it comes to the park board and really think about what could have happened if we had a different developer with a different vision, and what could have happened for connection to the river with the beautiful trails that we have along the river.
Thank you, Conrad, for your comments. Thank you for braving the storm to come out and make them. I'm glad you received unanimous consent to make them. I'm going to refer you to Assistant Superintendent Schroeder. He will be able to answer any questions for you as far as when that's scheduled to come before the board. That said, I am closing open time. Thank you for your for your comments, and I am
President Bourne.
back to Commissioner Musich.
I have a clarifying question for the board president. You stated at the beginning of open time that people have to call in by 3 p.m. to be put on the list, but our board rules indicate that people can sign up prior to the start of our board meeting. Did that rule change at a meeting I did not attend?
No, it did not. Thank you for the correction, Commissioner Musich.
Okay.
I am closing
Wonderful,
open
thank you.
time and going back to Vice Chair Hogan.
All right, thank you very much, President Bourne. Excited, we have a resolution on the floor here, Resolution 2019-126. Is there any discussion? It looks like Commissioner Forney has her light on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair, sorry about that. Anyway, first of all, I think this is a generous offer by the Minneapolis Foundation. I guess I would like to have some clarification of the benefit to to the park board in regards to this trip. And then also the decision of the commissioners that were chosen. Curious that the district commissioner had not been included in this opportunity. Is there anybody who can speak to that? Oh, great, thank you.
Yes. Sorry, this is Secretary Ringgold, please.
Chair Cogill, Co-Chair Cogill, Acting President. This is, sorry. So first of all, the individuals who are included on these are the individuals who were specifically invited. So these were individuals who were identified by the Lopet Foundation and the local host committee. Secondly, the benefits that would be received by the park board is probably along the lines of any local host committee event that we participate in. It's basically an opportunity to learn more about the event. So we're better prepared to maximize the experience of the participants as well as the spectators when they arrive in our city a year later. So it'd be similar to sending a local host committee to Greater and Greener 2 years before Greater and Greener was held here, or to NRPA before we held a Congress here. It's that type of opportunity where we get to see it, feel it, get a better understanding of it, and then do a better job as the collective individuals and organizations who have to make that event successful when it arrives here.
That's very helpful. I guess was curious hearing further and everything. Sounds like the logistics would be a benefit. And so I'm appreciative that the superintendent is going, and I know that he will share with his staff what logistics are necessary. Thank you. No, I think it's a great opportunity, and enjoy Quebec City.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Seeing nobody else, all those in favor of Resolution 2019-126, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cogill. I thank you for the reminder, Commissioner Meyer. I moved past an item of new business. Item A is our 2018 annual audit entrance meeting. Director Wiseman and we have Ms. Erickson here from the auditor's office who also braved the storm. So I'm glad I didn't go past that. But Director Wiseman.
President Bourne, may I ask one clarifying question? I'm assuming President Bourne and Commissioner Vita, did you abstain from voting on that?
We recused ourselves from the front. Yeah.
Great.
President Bourne and Commissioners, good evening. The 2018 year-end closed on February 8th. The state auditors have held a pre-entrance meeting with the superintendent and some board members and staff. And it was decided at that meeting that we would present an entrance meeting to you this evening. So Stephanie Erickson with the Office of State Auditors is here to present the scope of the audit.
Good evening, President Bourne and members of the Park Board. I also have with me Marie Henning, who works a lot on the audit for the Park Board, so she was willing to come up here and stand with me. My name is Stephanie Erickson, and I'm with the State Auditor's Office. And the information that I'm presenting tonight, as Julie mentioned, is part of our entrance meeting for the 2018 annual Park Board audit. So pursuant to Minnesota laws, the Office of the State Auditor audits the City of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board is considered a discrete component unit of the City of Minneapolis. And that just means that summary information from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's annual financial report is also presented in the city's comprehensive annual financial report. So the Park Board has their own annual financial report, and part of our audit is that we provide an opinion on the financial statements, that they're fairly presented. That opinion will appear in the Park Board's annual financial report when that's published in May or June. And then we also prepare a management and compliance report that we issue at the end of the audit. It includes any findings that we have from our audit, as well as our report on internal control over the financial statements. And then our report also includes Park Board's representation from management on the status of the findings from the prior year audit, whether they were corrected or partially corrected, and then also a corrective action plan for any current findings that we have in our report. For 2018, we are performing an audit of the financial statements. In some years, we also perform what we call a single audit, which includes an audit of the federal award programs that the Park Board has. For 2018, the Park Board did not expend enough federal awards to require the single audit done, so we are just performing an audit of the financial statements this year. Our audit is performed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. Standards for financial audits contained in Government Auditing Standards, which is issued by the Comptroller General of the United States, and also legal provisions of the Minnesota Legal Compliance Audit Guide. As part of our audit, we have about 3 different stages that we go through. The first one would be the planning, where we perform risk assessments. We update our understanding of significant accounts or transaction cycles. We perform internal control testing and legal compliance testing. And then we also meet with finance management and governance to talk about roles and responsibilities, the timing of the audit, and some initial details about the audit. And as Julie mentioned, that meeting has already been held. We held that on January 30th of 2019. The second phase of our audit would be our testing phase, so that's where we're actually testing significant account balances. We're auditing the individual funds of the Park Board. We follow up on our prior year audit findings. We audit the financial statements that are included in the annual financial report, along with the notes and any other information that's presented in there. And then we also hold progress meetings with management just to make sure we're keeping on track for the timing. In the third stage is our wrap-up stage. So in that stage, we're communicating with attorneys to talk about litigation that may have an impact on the Park Board's financial statements. We prepare a management representation letter that is sent to Park Board management and governance for signature. We finalize our findings to be included in our management and compliance report. The Park Board's annual financial report and our management and compliance report is reviewed by our quality control team in our main office before it's issued. And then we meet with management and governance to go over our draft documents, and then after that, we would issue those as our final report. And in the past, once our management and compliance report has been issued, we've been invited back to discuss just a summary of our audit. The audit schedule for the Park Board audit coincides with the city's completion schedule, since the Park Board is part of the city's report. The city submits their comprehensive annual financial report to the GFOA, which is the Governance Finance Officers of America, for a certificate award. Being that it's included in the city and the city issues or sends in their report for that award, the Park Board's report has to be issued before the city, and then it would have to be issued before June 30th, which is the deadline for the city to submit. So we're working with Park Board management on a completion schedule to make sure that that time frame is met. And this year, as part of our audit, we've been asked to look into the Park Board's professional services agreements. So we'll be testing a sample of the 2018 agreements, which is what our audit covers. It's just a current year scope. And we'll be testing those against Minnesota legal compliance as well as Park Board policies. If we have any findings related to those agreements and or the process that was followed, we'll treat this like our other audit areas and findings, where we discuss the findings with management. And then towards the end of the audit, we determine the significance of those findings, if there are any, and whether it will just be an item for discussion or whether it will appear in our management and compliance report. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Do folks have questions for the auditor team? Or Forney?
Yes, thank you for the briefing. You mentioned the professional service agreements, in essence, like our independent contractor agreements. Is that what you're referring to?
Commissioner Forney and President Bourne, yes, that's what we'll be looking into.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you for the report. I think that concludes our
Great.
audit entrance meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wiseman. Thank you for coming out. Moving on to petitions and communications, I will start this week with Commissioner Vita.
Thank you, President Bourne. Superintendent Bangura, that was a great event last night. what a welcome, right? It was a lovely space, a good crowd. You did a great job in welcoming everyone in the space. People love you. That was really good. You made us all proud. It was really good. And on top of that, it was really good food. I mean, it was really, really good food. One of the things I want to talk about is that we have a new business in North Minneapolis that is owned by a Black woman, Cajun Twist, serve the food there. I've been to the restaurant a couple times, but it's great that they're finally open. It's always busy over there at the trailhead, so she seems to do really well. So if anyone gets a chance to go over, stop by. You know, on a cold day, she has some really good warm food and adult beverages, so stop by. Also, Friday, I'm gonna go to Shrek at Lauren Park. There's a Shrek party at Lauren Park on Friday that I heard about from a young person, so this seems really exciting. This seems really exciting. At 4 o'clock, Lauren Park, there's a Shrek party. So if anyone knows anybody that's gonna be close by, like, we should all go. That sounds like it'll be a good time. Thanks, everyone, for voting on behalf of the three of us to go to Quebec City. I've served on the host committee for some time now, and I think it's gonna be great for our city to have this event. I think it's gonna be great for North Minneapolis. We have a lot of young people that's involved that are gonna witness something big happen in our city. So I really do appreciate your votes. And the last thing is, Commissioner Forney, I want to apologize to you. Earlier last week, I asked you to attend a meeting for me because I was on vacation. And, you know, as a newer elected official, I didn't know that I couldn't ask you to attend a meeting for me. And I'm sorry if I've caused you any embarrassment or, you know, I don't know like exactly what happened to you, but you went because I asked you to go and you weren't supposed to go, and we have to have the meeting over again. I myself wish that would have been a teachable moment for leadership to just contact me and say that you couldn't, that I couldn't do that, that I should have, you know, asked someone first before I asked you to step in on my behalf. So I'm really sorry for subjecting you to that. I know now that I shouldn't have, you know, asked you to go, and you voted for me. I had no idea that you would have needed to vote for anything. I just asked you to go to the meeting for me. So again, I'm really sorry for that. I've talked to Brian. He's clarified lots of things for me, what I can and can't do as elected official. So I'm sorry, it'll never happen again. Thanks for going though, but sorry for what happened.
Thank you, Commissioner Vita. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. At the suggestion of staff, we have postponed our Day on the Hill to Thursday, April 4th, because we wanted to invite a lot of kids to show up to it, and we thought it was more appropriate to have it during their spring break. So we're moving it there. Things look good so far. Governor Walz's budget is very encouraging. We start out at a much better place than we did last time around. He's proposed a significant increase in LGA funding, $10 million to the Minneapolis Employment Retirement Fund, keeping our share of the Parks Legacy Fund, and a lot of other encouraging things in his budget. So looking forward to meeting his office on April 4th.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Kogel.
Thank you, President Bourne. Well, I'm sure you're all wondering how my ice fishing went. I didn't catch any fish, but I was out there and it was cold. I also, I think the only other thing that I wanted to highlight is that for a while now I've been concerned about plastics consumption. Straws have been in the news recently. There was a great article in the Times on Sunday about plastics, and just a renewed interest of mine, something that I want to work with my fellow commissioners on, how we can think about how the park board can play a role in reducing plastic use. So I just want to mention that now as I start thinking about how we can do that as efficiently and quickly as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Kogel. Commissioner French. Commissioner Forney.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. That was Commissioner Vital, that was a very gracious gesture. I really do appreciate that. Couple of announcements. First of all, this Sunday is going to be the Uptown Chili Fest at Bryant Square. It's Sunday from 12 to 2:30, and certainly encourage people to come and partake in that. And then I also would like to announce that on March 2nd, I think about 2:30 in the morning, several members who are sitting up here are going to be jumping into Bidet Makaska. Our superintendent is going to be jumping in, Commissioner Vita, Commissioner Musich, and Commissioner Cogill. There are two teams that are under the auspices of the Park Board, and we would encourage anybody to support those. There's one called Park Dames that the superintendent and Commissioner Cogill are joining us on. We are gender liberal, obviously. And then there is another one with the human resources. So I certainly hope that people will support the Special Olympics. It's an awesome event. Our park police are awesome in all putting that on. So please pray for warmer weather. On a serious note, as Commissioner Vital indicated, last week I did attend the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board meeting. Commissioner Vital, as she indicated, asked me to attend and on her behalf, and the meeting was lacking a quorum. I did ask the chair of that board if I could be her proxy, and he indicated that I could. We, the Park Board, have 4 appointments to this board, and only one of those appointments was in attendance that evening. My understanding is that the attendance record on this board by our park appointees has been less than 60%. Yet we fund this board $31,000. At that meeting, our park staff applied for grants for $54,800, which would have had almost doubled our investment. An additional $53,500 was requested of their board by active partners of ours that indirectly benefits our park system. These board appointments are so important, and attendance is necessary to fulfill the work of these entities. We have 22 boards to which we appoint members. And of those boards, I have calculated that our overall attendance rate is less than 60%. At the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, that has raised over $16 million for our River First Capital initiative, our board appointee attended only one meeting. Our MIA appointee attended only one meeting, an entity which we are the fiscal pass-through for over $13 million, and the MIA sits on parkland. The Youth Coordinating Board has a similar structure to the St. Anthony's Board. We funded $16,000, but we leverage far more in collaborative outcomes, yet our attendance is 0. We need to take these appointments seriously. Send appointees that will attend. Our Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board Commissioner attendance is over 85%. Our outside face should be as attentive. I implore leadership to be a role model for attendance or assign those who are committed, invested, and passionate to fulfill our fiduciary duties. I also wanted to report on the BET. I know the opportunity to discuss this BET or the Board of Estimate Taxation staffing has been removed from our agenda. But since I was not a part of the discussion at the Committee of the Whole, I have been diligently studying the issue. I have spoken with numerous former BET members and asked for their wisdom. And I attended last week the BET meeting where the primary discussion was regarding the staffing. The focus was largely on better defining governance. I'm not sure what this means. The BET has very specific bylaws. There seems to be a great deal of misinformation regarding this board. We levy our own funding within the maximum that is set by the BET. The BET is that financial hub, touchstone, umbilical cord, where our funding is authorized. The total budget for the BET is $210,000 through a separate levy. The staff reports directly to the BET. The current staff person has served the board for 38 years. I believe his salary is approximately $130,000. Thus, any new staff person salary would more than likely be lower. Any cost savings would not go back into the general budget of the city nor the park board. At most every opportunity, all the former BET members that I spoke with have attended the Government Finance Offers Association training that is paid for through the BET. The current elected members have served on the BET for over a year now, yet none have attended any of the training. I am requesting for at least our board to have a briefing on what the BET is, what it does, why we need it, and how it is funded. And I hope at this next meeting that's been talked about that we will have the same presentation that the BET members have had. In conversations with many, we need the BET to ensure the city does not solely control the park board's funding, because if it does, we will rapidly no longer be an independent park board. I'm also a bit concerned about comments that have been made about the BET member, and her support of the BET has been represented as inaccurate. None of her votes have ever been against our NPP 20. In fact, the opposite. She has probably been our greatest supporter in this initiative. On a lighter note, I would like to piggyback on Commissioner Meyer's comment of last year that he hopes our staff will utilize our health rewards to lower their health insurance payments. I would therefore like to challenge all of my fellow commissioners to completing at least 300 health rewards this year. I'm going to submit this to the secretary and hope that it will be in the permanent record in the petitions and communications. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. Thank you, Meg, for your comments on the BET. That's helpful, as well as our outside appointments. I know I did my utmost to try to attend my outside appointments when I had them, and it was always a real honor and privilege to be able to represent the park board in that way. I'd also like to thank the public for their polite and kind notification of areas that were missed in being added to the asset management system for plowing. I understand that when we get a lot of snow, it can be extremely frustrating to encounter a section of trail that in the past has been plowed and suddenly this year is not. And people have been very patient and kind in letting us know, particularly me, through various methods of those segments. And we are still working on onboarding all of that stuff to our asset management system, so it is a bit challenging. And I'm very thankful, as is our staff, that folks have let us know that that needs to be updated. So everything that has been reported to me in the past couple weeks, I'm happy to share, has been added to that system and should be plowed as part of today's snow removal efforts. I also am hearing a ton of excitement and opinions about the draft designs that have been released for the Minnehaha Creek. I would imagine that my colleague from the 6th Park District is as well. Those are in no way set in stone yet. We are still planning. So if you've got opinions or thoughts or better ideas than what's contained in those documents, we'd love to hear from you. There is an online survey on the project page, and there is also a CAC meeting tomorrow evening, which will include a public comment period and an opportunity to interact with the park planners and designers about those projects. That's being held at Morris Park at 6 p.m., goes till 8. And again, if you need more information, it's on the park project page. I also wanted to let Commissioner Meyer know I'm not going to be able to attend the new date for Lobby Day, and I'm really bummed about that. I was hoping I'd be able to participate this year, but I am still happy to help in any capacity that I can to make that day be a success. So please don't count me out, although I can't be there that day. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Just a couple of just a couple of points. Several commissioners attended, and we talked about a little bit, a welcome reception for Superintendent Bangora. We want to give a very special thanks again to the Minneapolis Foundation and to the Lopet for hosting that. Also to KP Companies for helping arrange the details of it, and it was really nice for Al to meet a lot of our frequent partners there. So and it was just a good time to be there. Commissioner French, Commissioner Vita, Superintendent Bangora, and Chief Ohado and I had a meeting with Colonel Langer from the State Patrol last week. In response to several commissioners stated some concerns about the partnership agreement that we have with the State Patrol. It was a really productive meeting. I think a lot of concerns were addressed. There was a commitment from Colonel Langer to request that Chief Ohado and our force help conduct some training for their officers on how to patrol in Minneapolis, just kind of increase their situational awareness for their troopers that are working on our behalf within the city. And I think that was a very productive outcome of that meeting. So I just wanted to thank commissioners and the superintendent and Chief Ohado for helping to make that happen. Superintendent Bangora, a little bit of an update for folks that had requested it at this meeting, and this will be part of the update you'll be receiving, but Superintendent Bangora and myself and Director Wiseman had a meeting with the Treasurer of the Board of Estimate and Taxation and President Bender last week. The Treasurer of the Board of Estimate and Taxation and Director Wiseman and Superintendent Bangora and myself had all looked at some of the concerns that may be very relevant to the Park Board if there is a change in some of their staffing. I think that there was consensus from everybody in that meeting, including the Treasurer of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, that there are some functions that, when we're at this historic transition, that absolutely should move back into the city function where they probably belong. Just to set the record straight on a couple of things that may be misstated in public record, there was a vote at the Board of Estimate and Taxation this last week on the agenda. There was a vote to authorize the debt servicing of about $118 million in debts for critical public works projects. Over 10 million of that were Minneapolis Park Board projects, including NPP 20 projects. The historic agreement that we put together is phenomenal. It is only the first step. We need to authorize those votes every single year. Otherwise, we go back to the battlefield and we have a referendum. I was really proud of the fact that the commitment to honor the NPP 20 agreement passed on a 5-1 vote. And so there are votes at the BET all the time that uphold our commitments to the MPP 20 agreement. So I want to thank our advocates that helped ensure that our promises were kept that we all made with NPP 20. I think Commissioner Vita and Commissioner Forney had already stated that there was some confusion around the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board. I think we've all done our best to make this a teachable moment. It's hard to know that things. It's hard to give somebody corrective advice if I don't know that somebody's being sent and somebody's dead. I could have had that conversation on the front end. If anybody ever has any questions for me on procedures or process, I will do my best to make sure that we get answers for them. Our outside boards are critically important. Our appointments are critically important. I want to thank our partners at the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board, Commissioner Forney, who has been on the board for 5 years now on the Minneapolis Park Board, is very familiar with our procedures, what we can follow, what we cannot follow. I would hope would be very aware that the Minneapolis Park Board has no rules around sending proxies in people's places. What could be perceived by some as a improper calling to order of a publicly funded body that did not have quorum, where one of our members falsely represented to be the quorum-making member, and then taking votes to give this entity tens of thousands of dollars in grants could be seen by some as fraudulent, and we could not receive that money. So I want to thank our partners at the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board that have agreed to take another meeting that can be properly called and can be properly voted on. The fiduciary responsibility that we have to the members of the public is incredibly important, and impersonating members of other bodies is very problematic. And so I would like to make sure that all of our board members have training on the procedures and operating mechanisms of the Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Forney, you have already had, or Commissioner Musich, you have already had your petitions and communications time. The one last correction I want to make for the record, the Board of Estimate and Taxation does have bylaws. The governance issue that we are discussing is critically important. The bylaws of the Board of Estimate and Taxation are in direct contradiction to the Minneapolis City Charter. The bylaws that the Board of Estimate and Taxation operate under were last amended in the mid-1970s. The bylaws of the bylaws of the Board of Estimate and Taxation actually require 5 votes to authorize debt, which is in direct contradiction to the charter. So the governance discussions that we have are critically important, and it's critically important that everyone understands the roles and operating procedures of the bodies and and outside organizations upon which they sit. Seeing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
We have one thing that'll come back to us.
I would recess the full board.
I'm so moved.
Yep.
Or are you just?
I'm just recessing the full board.
Got it.
I'd like to call the planning committee to order at 6:10 now. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Meyer.
Here.
Commissioner Vita. Here. Vice Chair Cogill. Here. Chair Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And there are no minutes, so we won't take approval of that. We have one action item, and it looks like, read the
I
bill.
have Resolution 2019-121, a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with the Burger Fountain Work Group Committee, Citizens for Loring Park Community, and the Friends of Loring Park for planning activities and fundraising related to the Burger Fountain rehabilitation, artistic winter cover, and plaza improvements in Loring Park.
Thank you. Colleen, presentation, please.
Good evening,
Welcome.
Chair Forney, Commissioners. What you have before you tonight is a memorandum of understanding for the Burger Fountain rehabilitation. A little bit on this project, that what's also known as the Dandelion Fountain was donated by a former Park Board Commissioner, Benjamin Berger, in 1975. And it's definitely recognized by the community as an important landmark in Loring Park. It's in both NRP plans, it's in the city's small area plan for the neighborhood, and it's also identified in our adopted downtown service area master plan. And there are 3 things in particular that we propose to do with the Burger Fountain. One is to improve, to fix, to repair, to replace aging mechanicals because the fountain is leaking and in poor condition. The second is to work on the plaza and to increase the pedestrian and bicycle routes through there and to just generally improve the function of that plaza. And the third is to replace the winter cover that's currently used and is difficult to install. So Loring Park right now is number 67 on the NPP 20 criteria matrix and is listed for play area improvements next year, but it's unlikely that improvement funds for the Dandelion Fountain would come up in the near future, which is how we arrive at this memorandum of understanding. So this has been approved, or rather reviewed as to form by legal counsel, and this MOU is between the Park Board, the Burger Fountain Work Group Committee, which is a subcommittee of Citizens for a Loring Park Community, and Friends of Loring Park. And I'd like to acknowledge President of Friends of Loring Park, Dave Heil, is in the audience today, and the chair of the Burger Fountain Work Group, Mary Bujold, is also here. And this MOU will address the three things that are the focus of the service area master plan for Loring Park, which are fountain rehabilitation and replacement, the artistic winter cover, and improvement of the surrounding plaza. And it does have several milestones to meet for fundraising and other activities through 2022, and the MOU will end following completion of rehabilitation. So here's an aerial of the fountain as it is today, and a couple images showing you some of the damage that's been done to bricks and the leaking problems we have with the basins. On the right is the plan that was proposed and adopted in the Downtown Service Area Master Plan, which simplifies the basin and does a rehab of all the mechanicals to prevent the flooding. It includes garden and seating areas, and it widens the plaza to increase circulation for pedestrians and bicycles, and also encourages connections to Midtown Greenway, sorry, not Midtown Greenway, Loring Greenway, across Willow. The winter cover that we're currently using, you can see in the upper left, it's a plywood enclosure. It's rather difficult for our staff to get in place and heavy and bulky to store. So our partners in this have worked with Dunwoody. Dunwoody recently started an architecture program, and several students worked this last fall to come up with some ideas for what that winter cover potentially could be, and you see some of those here. The community engagement that was done to arrive at the plan for Burger area was done through the Downtown Service Area Master Plan, and that included all of the events that you see listed here. In addition, I didn't add at the bottom, but this Monday from 6 to 8 p.m. at Loring Park, our partners will be holding a community meeting to show the designs that have come up already through that the Dunwoody students have created. So I'd like to invite Mary Bujold up. She had a couple comments she wanted to make, and since she drove through the snow, I hope it's appropriate.
Absolutely. Mary, welcome. We're so glad that you're here and safe.
So Chair Forney and Commissioners, it's my pleasure to be here this evening. And first of all, I would just like to thank the Park Board and also Park Board staff for having a vehicle such as the Memorandum of Understanding that is allowing us to bring this before you and to create a collaborative effort between the Park Board and Citizens for a Loring Park Community, Friends, and our work group committee to be able to undertake this significant project, which is, I guess, the most I can say is that it is really beloved by the community. And I think that, of course, it's been in our NRP plans, it's been in our master small area plan, it's been on the strategic plan for Friends of Loring Park. And I feel as though this is kind of our beginning to kind of jumpstart this project and really move it forward to completion. And so I really know that the community is excited by this, and we've had a lot of participation already with the Dunwoody exercise, and we also have, actually Dunwoody has also, there have been other parts of Dunwoody that has wanted to continue to work with us on this project, and in terms of potentially offering some ideas about further implementation down the road, but their graphics department also wants to work with us on some promotional items. And of course, we have a big fundraising effort that we're going to have to institute. But I guess I just wanted to reinforce the fact that the community really is behind this, and that we're all very excited by this, and the ability to work collaboratively between the organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, really. We appreciate your support and energy behind this. Questions, commissioners? Oh, please. Yes, Commissioner Coyle.
No questions at this point, but just comments here. I'm very supportive of this MOU. I'm really excited about this. I sat in early on some of the decorative winter cover presentations, and I'm excited to see what the finalists are. I looked at a couple of the options, so it's cool, and there's been some wild ideas, so please check them out if you're so inclined. The students did a great job in thinking outside the box, I think.
Yes, definitely that, definitely.
But anyway, this is fantastic, and thank you so much for coming tonight, and look forward to the next
Absolutely.
steps and getting the ball rolling on this.
Yeah, we do too. Again, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Any other comments or questions people have? No? I have to share with you that my parents, I think, were in Sydney about the same time that former Commissioner Berger was there, and I remember their stories of the dandelion and the delight. So for me, it's a little bit of a touchstone, my parents. So
Absolutely.
whatever, I think fondly, in that regard. Just some clarifications that I just wanted to make. It's referred to in here that the park dedication fee may possibly be used for this, and I just wanted to make sure that there's a total understanding that we're talking about new amenities and not any, maintenance or repair to the existing fountain.
Correct.
And then I was wondering, we're talking about raising funds, and I don't want to burden you with more, but have we talked at all about possibly a sustaining fund also? Because unfortunately, these things don't last forever, and I just wondering if that had been in your hat.
So we haven't discussed that yet, I think because we've been so kind of, I will just say this, a little overwhelmed with kind of all of the things that we have to consider with this project. But I think that we understand that that is a concern, and I think that we would potentially love to be able to incorporate that. And we haven't had a lot of discussions about that, but I'm sure that we will be bringing it up and exploring different avenues for how we can create that.
I hope so. I mean, I don't want to burden you with more, but I don't want a future park board to have to deal with another redo, whatever. And so
Oh, yeah,
somehow
I
that we, can figure it out, that would be, wonderful if you can just, add that little checkbox or something like that. That would be marvelous.
No, it's a good suggestion.
I also was going to say, I love the idea that you went to Dunwoody and engaged, students there in the creative designs for the cover. And I appreciate hearing that you're looking to ways to continue doing it. And then lastly, I want to say I don't know if it was Colleen who wrote it or whatever, but the fact of shepherding, that this committee that has been put together and everything is shepherding. That's just, it's so, speaks to, I think, the dedication all of you have put to it, and I look forward to seeing what creative things happen and wish you success in the project.
Thank you very much.
So with that, all those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Good luck.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next presentation is of the draft Mississippi Gorge Regional Park Master Plan. And we have Tyler and Saeed and our sidekick, Adam.
Security. Good evening, Chair Forney and committee members and commissioners. My name is Tyler Pedersen. I'm one of the design project managers. You'll notice Ellen Kennedy is not up here. She obviously has left the park board for other endeavors, and Saeed and I have taken over with the help of Adam Arvidsson here in bringing this plan to approval. So we're here tonight to really just get you guys warmed up to the draft master plan. We've spent a good year on this thing and had a lot of great engagement opportunities, and we think we've got a really solid plan here. Go here. So tonight we'll be talking about, we'll give you just an introduction to the plan and where it's located. I think you're all probably pretty familiar with the gorge. It's that big Grand Canyon looking thing on the river.
Thingy-majabby, huh?
Yeah, and looking at different segments, we're calling them framework areas, and then also looking at how the dams, whether they're there or not in the future, how that will affect the project and the park. Saeed will go over the community engagement summary for you, and then I'll go over the visioning and guiding principles, the design guidelines, the focus area framework plans, some priorities and costs, and then we'll get into some questions and comments. The master plan is really a tool for receiving funds from the Metropolitan Council. So after the board here approves the plan, it'll go to the Met Council for approval as well, and we'll open up those funding streams hopefully. The last master plan for the area was in 1982, so it's 1 year older than I am, so 37 years old, which is rather old for a master plan. There was some conceptual work done on portions of the regional gorge back in the late 90s, 1997, but it really only focused on a few elements of the park, and it was never adopted by the Met Council. So this master plan, considered for your approval, will go to the Met Council and then open the door to future funding for the next 20 to 30 years. So the geography of the master plan encompasses the Mississippi Gorge Regional Park from the number 9 bridge up on the upstream end to the Minnehaha Regional Park, Godfrey Parkway area on the south end, and on both sides of the river in Minneapolis, and not in St. Paul, because St. Paul is on the east side of the river on the south end, if that makes sense. So we split the area, just to make things easier, into 7 different framework areas, just making it easier for us. They're Bohemian Flats on the upstream end, East River Flats Park, Riverside Park and Annie Young Meadow, the Southeast Flats area, Longfellow Flats, and the Minneapolis Rowing Club area, Oak Savannah area, and the Lower Gorge Islands area. And the words that are in quotes are just kind of our generalizations of the area. We're not naming them anything right now. We're just kind of giving them just a unique identifier. So dams or not, there is a possibility that those dams might be removed in the future. It's not really up to this plan to make that decision, but we need to be adaptable to whatever that decision is. So what we did is we actually overlaid a 1895 shoreline and superimposed it on a current aerial photo, and it kind of gave us a good picture of what might happen. So working with our hydrologists on the project, we came to a few just generalized conclusions. Water velocity would go up, however the depth of the water would go down. It would also expose geomorphic features, rocks, boulders, pools, islands, floodplains, bedrock outcroppings, various things that are underground or under the river now. And there's a possibility for historic islands to be either uncovered or even recreated. But it's important just to know that the CAC didn't recommend removal or protection of the dams.
Hi, my name is Saeed Ali. I'm a park planner. And I'm going to summarize the community engagement as Tyler mentioned. We've done obviously a number of outreach. We spoke to a number of community neighborhood organizations. We've had eight community advisory committees. While we were doing that, we did 7 project advisory committees, 2 technical advisory committees, and we had 8 listening sessions and six open houses. On top of that, there was special events that we did, and I'm not gonna go through the whole list, but as you can see, there was 2 surveys we did as well. With the first survey, there was close to 1,400 respondents, and the second survey had about almost 300. The purpose of the first survey was to take the pulse of the community prior to the concept design development. And we asked a number of questions to figure that out. The first question was, which parts of the Mississippi Gorge do people often visit? As you can see on the survey here, West River Parkway was the top one, followed by East River Parkway. Also, we wanted to know what is the relationship to the gorge. Majority of the folks, the visitors, are local visitors. Also, the means of transportation that the folks that visit the regional park. Majority of folks are folks that live there. They bike or walk to the area. But also, there's folks that don't live in the area that actually use their car to come to the area. Also, we wanted to know what are people's favorite activities at the gorge. As you can see, hiking trails in natural areas and biking and walking or on paved trails were the top of the list. We also asked what folks would like to see improved in the gorge. The top things are improved connections between bluffs and rivers and natural service trails. Another question we asked was, what would you like to see added at the gorge? It was bathrooms, drinking fountains, and also I wanted to mention that mountain biking and trail running was one of the things people would like to see added at the gorge, which was interesting. The second survey that we did was, the purpose of the survey was to make sure the design team is on track. We were trying to see if we were following the process that the community actually told us to follow, and we had close to 300 respondents on this survey. One of the questions we asked was, do you feel these opportunities reflect your desired changes and enhancements with the Bohemian Flats Park? Majority of the people felt they did, and I don't want to go through the whole list and bore people with data. So as you can see, we had great responses from the public with these questions. And I'll switch it with Tyler on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Said.
Thank you. So yeah, the last few slides are just kind of reassuring the design team that we're really on the right track for each of the park areas, and on average it's about 80% reassurance that we're doing some good work. So with the help of the CAC, our Community Advisory Committee, we developed a vision, just that overarching statement, and I'll just very quickly read it. Nestled within the only true gorge along the Mississippi River, the Mississippi Gorge Regional Park is a wild, welcoming space that is actively managed and mindfully stewarded to balance and preserve its unique natural, historic, and recreational amenities for the wellness and enjoyment of all park users. So good stuff there. And so that's the big picture vision. We also developed some goals, some guiding principles that support that vision. They go from natural resource and ecology, resiliency and sustainability, providing high quality facilities and programming, increasing safety, addressing access and connectivity, placemaking, equity and inclusion, history, heritage, arts and culture, and health and wellness. So it really reflects the broad gamut of themes for the gorge. So I'm just going to go over some of the guidelines, the design guidelines for the area, and really this is just kind of it's just kind of a broad set of guidelines that cover both inside the framework areas, those 7 framework areas, and outside the 7 framework areas. So those framework areas don't cover every single piece of land out there. This really covers kind of those connective tissues, the parkways, the trails, some of the natural areas along the very linear park. So the guideline elements, they'll include things for their trails and parkways, signage, site amenities, planting and landscape, views, public art, etc. Really just developing standards for the park. So the first framework area is Bohemian Flats Park. This particular view here is with the dams in its current situation. Some of the recommendations include a formal picnic area and shelter with green roof, something that's actually being constructed right now. A natural amphitheater built into the slope, improved trail connections to the U of M, shade trees and native landscaping throughout, and kind of a fun one, river barge. There's some really cool precedents for this. It is actually adding in a floating restaurant or cafe and a swimming pool. As you know, it's probably not the best thing to swim in the river right now, well, especially not right now, but in any season. So adding a swimming element is really kind of a cool idea. And then keeping the tour boat docking that's there right now. So here's just kind of a snapshot image of that. Some volleyball courts, some picnic shelters, and then the barges. So then, without the dams, there's some things that change there. We actually gain property, we gain land. So some of the recommendations that are included in this, which are kind of on top of what's recommended with the previous version, you get an expanded beach area with picnic tables, kayak and canoe storage. There could be an ADA accessible canoe launch or kayak launch, something that we don't have in our system now, and a paddle share opportunity, partnering with the National Park Service. It really increases space for wetland emergent vegetation. You get a lot of different species and biohabitat with that new land that's created. There's an opportunity to actually create some cool giant stone steps. Perhaps it's maybe there's some native bedrock down there that is there that will be unveiled. There's opportunity for boardwalks, interpretation, and also floodplain forest, which is pretty minimal in the gorge today. And here's a snapshot of that. So it really just, it takes away that hard edge wall and blends in the park and the river with a really nice habitat there. East River Flats Park, just south of the U of M campus on the east bank. Some of the recommendations here include formalized park entry, connecting the U of M campus to the park. We want to be good neighbors and really welcoming and and bring people to our park. It also includes a open event lawn, flexible space. We want to reopen the restrooms. We think there's a really good opportunity for a climbing wall here. And of course, adding wayfinding signage to the downstream southeast flats. A lot of people that go to this park don't know that if you just keep going downriver, there's a really cool trail system and elevated boardwalk. So back to the other side of the river, the west bank at Riverside Park, Nanny Young Meadow. Some of the recommendations here include a pollinator garden space with picnic opportunity, adding an additional basketball court and improving the existing basketball court, renovating the existing restroom building. It's in pretty rough shape now. And then create a mid-level terrace and nature play picnic space between the kind of the lower Annie Young Meadow area and the upper park. There's kind of a cool little terrace area that has a lot of illicit activities going on, and I think the project really wants to clean that area up and bring a positive use to that space. There's also a historic staircase that we want to restore. And then adding in a picnic barbecue area and ADA accessibility at Annie Meadow, and that's also a project that's underway right now. So back to the other side of the river, the east bank again. This is what we're kind of dubbing the southeast flats area. It's just kind of a really beautiful open space, great for birding, great for walking around and kind of getting out of the city. Some of our recommendations include the exploration of a potential formalized ice climbing of Bridalveil Falls, and noting safety warning about ice climbing. We know that's probably a touchy thing in our system, but we think that there's a potential there. Cities like Duluth have parks where they do ice climbing. Boardwalk on the seasonally flooded areas. There's a spot of the trail that's down there. It's a paved trail, but it floods just about every season. So we want to keep that open, and bringing in a boardwalk will really help keep it accessible. And there's room for improvement of stormwater outfalls. You know, I don't know the number, but there's many stormwater outfalls, and they're very large. And anything that we can really do to improve stormwater entering both into our park and into the Mississippi River is a positive thing. And then we're exploring connections of the natural surface trails into the St. Paul system, which is just downstream of this park area. The Longfellow Flats area, just below Lake Street and Longfellow Grill area. This is really connecting, making connections over a kind of a washed out outfall. And that's something that we'd really like to do here. And again, enhancing the stormwater outfalls, including signage and wayfinding, interpretation, bike racks, and trash receptacles at a new trailhead on the parkway level. The existing staircase is also in pretty rough shape, and we want to be able to repair that. We're almost through this. Stick with me here. The Oak Savannah area, which is just south of what I was just talking about at about 36th. This is a really beautiful area. It's got quite a few trails in it right now, and we want to be able to remove some of the unsustainable trails. We also want to improve the landscape there, make it even better. Savannah area, and improve the outfall. Right now it's a fairly broken pipe, big concrete pipe that's broken, and we want to be able to make that a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So the final area here, the Lower Gorge Islands area. So the kind of the green area, kind of the islands that are shown on the black and white map on the left-hand side of the screen, that's that 1890s shoreline. So say the dams were removed. This is just a possible snapshot of what that could look like. The photo on the right-hand side of the screen is a photo of this same area, before the dams were in place. So very, very different landscape down there. I won't go into all the issues because there's just a lot of unknowns. Some of them are we just don't know what's underground right now. We don't know how much dredging has impacted the bottom of the river, and what's contaminated down there. But just kind of a snapshot of what could be. So on to the numbers here. So we've got the priorities, and the priorities were really just those lists of key items that I had mentioned. There's quite a few other recommendations that are all in the book that you can that hopefully you've read. But really those are the key priorities that I had mentioned for each of those framework areas. The costs, a total of $25 million, or a little bit more than that. It's a big ticket item, but it's also a very big park. So if we split off, each of those framework areas, some of the smaller ones are kind of in the $1-2 million range. That's fairly normal for a medium-sized regional park. The highest one is Bohemian Flats Park, but there's a lot of potential there. All right, any questions or comments?
Commissioner Musich, I think you're first.
Thank you, Chair Forney. I'm not on this committee, and I appreciate being given an opportunity to speak. So, in reading through the plan, I do not see anywhere that says the natural surface trails will be repurposed for mountain biking trails, although it is a question that I frequently get about the plan, why we're doing that. So if you could just clarify for me and the public the intention of the plan for those natural surface trails.
Sure. Chair Forney, Commissioner Musich, great question. So we've had a long debate with the CAC and amongst the CAC members about what users should be allowed where and what trails should be changed or modified in different locations. Also, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misinformation out there on what a natural surface trail is, how it acts, who uses it, and the difference between a hiking trail and a mountain biking trail in terms of sustainability. They're actually very similar, if not the same. So the CAC actually decided to kind of put off who's going to be using the trails and where, and we're going to be doing a future study on the east side of the river where mountain biking and trail running trails might be most appropriate. And until then, until we actually have an implementable solution there, basically all the trails in the gorge will remain hiking only.
Okay, so when we're talking about the Winchell Trail on the western bank of the river, we are not discussing, even in the future, changing that to mountain biking trail?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Musich, that's correct. The Winchell Trail will remain hiking only.
Okay, and the rationale for that is due mostly to the terrain, if I understand correctly, and the use of that area as a birding sanctuary. Is that correct?
I believe that's fairly correct. The terrain, you can put a mountain bike trail just about anywhere. If you've been to Moab, you can mountain bike anywhere. But appropriateness for an area, yes, the Winchell Trail is and should be only mountain bike, or excuse me, only hiking.
Thank you very much for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Colgill. No, excuse me, Commissioner Meyer. Apologize.
I was disappointed that you didn't make a recommendation on the dam. I've had lots of constituents reach out to me, both for and against removing it, and I kept saying, well, I kind of want to hear what the advisory committee says. Where is that at? Like, who is going to be making that decision? I mean, is it St. Paul that starts that? Or?
No.
Chair Forney, Commissioner Meyer, the Army Corps of Engineers, they run and manage the lock and dams, both the upper and lower St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam and Lock and Dam number 1, and probably many others downstream. They're really going through a disposition study, and that just means they're trying to figure out whether they should keep it or not. It doesn't mean that whether or not they should remove them or not. It's just, should we sell them or should we keep managing them? Beyond that, that'd be a great question for somebody from the Army Corps of Engineers, and I can certainly inquire with them and get a current situation report from them. I can certainly do that for you.
Was it something that there was a lot of debate over, or was this just something that people weren't very interested in looking at?
Oh, it's definitely, there's some debate over it. There's a few CAC members that, had opinions on it, certainly, and we had stakeholders that came to the meeting and wanted to say one way or the other, whether they liked it or not. But for the park board, we just didn't feel, that CAC didn't feel that it was something that we should recommend for or against, but rather just have a plan that reacts to whatever that future might be.
I love the restaurant on a floating barge idea. In regard to the pool, is the reason that swimming isn't advised in the river, is that because of pollution or because of drowning risk or both?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Meyer, so swimming in our system is a really big thing, and the river is that's kind of where people bathed 100 years ago, or before we had, people bathed in our lakes, and now it's just not an appropriate spot for people to swim, especially at Bohemian Flats. The current there is rather strong, coming off of St. Anthony Falls. Most of the days that I've been down there, there's a lot of foam and the river's really moving. So just something that we wouldn't consider at this time.
So it's drowning risk?
I can't say exactly. I'm not a safety personnel that would be able to assess that, but I think that's kind of one of the reasons that we're pursuing a kind of an alternative swimming location.
The $25 million cost, how many years is that over? Or does it?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Meyer, also a good question. So it's a big ticket item, but the life of the master plan is 20 to 30 years. And if you look at like the Central Riverfront Master Plan, the previous version of it, it did take quite some time to implement all that. And so we assume that in this master plan, that $25 million would be spread out over some time.
And is there that much money expected to be in the budget, or is it pretty aspirational?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Meyer, we don't have it in the budget now, although we do have, with this project, we had a little over $2 million, and we're currently spending 1.4 million of that right now on improvements and rehabilitation at Bohemian Flats and Antioch Meadow. But this plan is really that tool to leverage future funding. That's something that we'll be seeking.
You finished? Okay. Good. Commissioner Colville.
Thank you, Chair Forney. A couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation. Really helpful. Bohemian Flats, is it still guided to be mostly lawn, or is it too conceptual to even say?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Cogill, Bohemian Flats is kind of guided to be anything but lawn.
Okay.
Certainly there could be lawn space, but not anywhere near the magnitude that there is now. A portion of that lawn space is often used by other agencies for their various bridge projects and things like that. So it really just hasn't had a chance to really catch up on its natural plantings that we've had a couple of times. So, but this plan certainly does encourage native plantings, floodplain forest in some areas, as well as more habitat, really.
So when I'm seeing the light green, I shouldn't just assume that that's all like lawn space wherever I'm seeing it on any of these. Is that a fair assessment, or is it kind of too conceptual at this point?
That's close. It's really is conceptual at this time, but I can reassure you that the broad theme of the River Gorge is natural plantings.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Perfect. And do you have any estimate for the number, or is there an exact number of increased, I guess, amenities that are being proposed in this plan versus what is currently within the planned study area? And by amenities, I mean new structures or built pieces.
Chair Forney, Commissioner Cogill, are you referring to just Bohemian Flats or the whole?
The entirety of it.
I would say throughout the entire area, there's not much going to be added. You know, there might be some handicap accessible walks. There might be some shade structures or some extra benches, things like that. But for the most part, very little structures. But at Bohemian Flats, that is quite a bit more of an urban setting park at the top of the River Gorge, and it really would be well received by having more people there. And if we have extra buildings, if we have activity space, volleyball courts, places for people to go, it'll really enliven that space.
Fantastic. Another question on the Bohemian Flats. So I know it is a regional park, but as Saeed kind of pointed out, from the community engagement, most folks are accessing that park from kind of the local community, it seems like. And a lot of folks bike and walk. Was there any consideration within the master plan for Bohemian Flats of removing the parking? I know there's a lot of mixed income, low income housing adjacent to that site. Was that a consideration?
Chair Forney, Commissioner Cogill, we did kind of look at how parking is configured here, and we know that with added amenities, features, buildings, things like that, there's going to be more people accessing the space. The paved parking won't increase. However, we are suggesting a grass paved lot, basically, underneath the Washington Avenue Bridge. We can't grow anything there anyways. So we're suggesting that area just be kind of an overflow parking area. So we really didn't want to increase any really hard surfaces. We're even doing green roofs on the shelters.
Right, but there's no reduction?
No.
Proposed, no. Okay. Great, I think those are all my questions at this time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, I'll ask some questions. I know that the conversation of the dams removal and everything, it's an unknown. You did show Bohemian Flats with and without, but no other section showed that. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, was there a full realization of what that might look like? Because if Ford Dam is removed, that's a huge, huge change to so many things in there. So, you know, whether it was on the technical side or the citizen side, do you feel we had a robust discussion about that?
Chair Forney, that's a really great question. We did have discussions on this at numerous CAC meetings and open houses and varying conversations and with the Corps of Engineers, et cetera. And there's just so many unknowns with what might happen that we really couldn't predict too much. You know, we can predict a few things, but nothing that's really set in stone. And for us to spend quite a bit of money on doing those predictions, not knowing exactly what might happen, we found better uses for those funds in our designer's scope of work. But we did make time to create this drawing here, and in the plan it's explained much better than what I can verbally explain now. And then where we really saw differences between the 1890s shoreline and today's shoreline was in that south area. So we did end up creating that framework area, that seventh framework area on the south side to kind of just explain and kind of detail some of those possibilities for that area.
Yeah, I'd never seen that picture. That was wonderful. You know, I like I say, I'd never was aware of it and everything, knowing that I'm rowing over islands, whatever. I'm not sure I want to know that. Anyway, I have concerns about, I think you said a climbing wall plus a ice climbing wall?
Yeah.
Two different things. I have concerns about both of those. You know, it's just such a hard thing what we're doing with Minnehaha Falls, whatever, and that safety issue is very disconcerting. So I would walk with a great deal of trepidation moving forward with that. Certainly. Which brings me to the point that has always been a concern in the gorge. and that is emergency access. The gorge, the Grand Canyon, it is very, very inaccessible. And so the more amenities that we add, you know, so do we have, once again, a fairly robust discussion about the inaccessibility and how would we respond to perhaps increase of emergency calls?
Chair Forney, the master plan really didn't get into kind of a safety plan for the area, but we did meet with Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and I actually was able to go on a boat with one of them about 1.5 years ago. It was a lot of fun, just kind of speeding around, you know, around the river here. And then Ellen did meet with the Sheriff's Department, and of course our own Sergeant Helmick. He helped us out tremendously on you know, other safety versions. But any other questions about safety and accessibility for emergency vehicles, I guess I would refer you to Chief Ohado.
Yeah, to me, that's a real concern. I mean, I have been a part of rescues down there, and it's pretty dicey. You referred to bathrooms, and do we have any specific, you know, ideas of where they were, and, you know, how are we going to function? Are these going to be year-round? Are these going to be, you know, anyway, I know bathrooms are requested everywhere, and I just, being that gorge is so difficult. Do we have a specific, did you put those in kind of where potentially they could be?
Chair Forney, we did in the framework areas,
Okay.
and then all those kind of those kind of interstitial areas between. That would fall under design guidelines, and in the design guidelines, it creates kind of a minimum distance between certain amenities, and so that's included in that.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Then lastly, in the last commissioners, we moved a motion to create something in honor of Cleveland. And I wondered if that was something that was, you know, talked about, you know, in the CAC, where that might possibly be, you know, an honoring of. Go ahead. I know somebody else wants to speak to that too.
Chair Forney, we didn't talk a whole lot about. We talked about the history of Cleveland and his influences on, you know, our park system and the gorge here, but we didn't talk a whole lot about. You know, renaming something in honor of him and his work. You know, if there's a proposal in the future, I think we could work with something there. But we weren't. The CAC didn't have a lot of interest in pursuing that. They did have a great interest in officially naming the Mississippi River Gorge Regional Park to be Mississippi River Gorge Regional Park, because it's not officially named that now.
Oh, well, good. That's good to know. Yeah. I know Commissioner Musich wants to speak, so I do.
Thank you, Chair Forney. I'm so glad that you brought up the Horace Cleveland naming. Commissioner Vreeland and I did put forward a resolution 4 or 5 years ago now, asking that we do designate some portion of the River Gorge for Mr. Cleveland in honor of the work that he did to ensure that the Windshield Trail would exist, that we have this parkland, that people would be able to continue to access this space as a public space as the city developed. So if we do have an opportunity to try to identify an overlook or a portion of this park, that would be amazing. And it looks like Director Arvidsson has something he'd like to say to me about this, so I will stop talking.
Okay. Chair Forney, Commissioner Musich, there have been several requests over the years that were sort of formal requests under the naming policy that haven't moved as quickly as they perhaps should have. We are also finalizing our overall property list, and we are frankly finding a whole bunch of names of parks that aren't official names, that have never been named by the park board. There are a dozen or more. At the same time, we are looking at names of parks and their provenance, and sort of beginning to maybe question that. The short answer, I guess, is that Christine Downey, is a real property administrator, is leading this effort. And we expect to have first a study item for the board to talk about kind of naming all at once, and then potentially an action or series of actions that would maybe take steps to officially name parks, and then to potentially assign names, as you're suggesting with the HWS Cleveland, those that have been brought forward and are following the naming policy and have sort of passed their sunset time. I guess what I'm saying is we're kind of looking at bringing this in a big package sometime this year, because we're discovering a whole lot of other naming things that we do need to eventually rectify. There's a lot of housekeeping around naming right now. So
Okay.
stay tuned.
Thank you for that update. I appreciate it. I can be patient. Thanks.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you all for fine work, and look forward to the final opinions on going forward with this. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned.
Time being 7 p.m. The roll for the admin and finance committee.
Commissioner French.
Here.
Commissioner Hassan. Absent. Vice Chair Cogill. Here. Chair Vita.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Microphone?
A motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
A motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
We vote on the
Oh.
agenda.
Oh, all those in favor of approval of the agenda signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposed? Motion approved. Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. We have an action item, a couple action items.
I'll move Resolution 2019-122, a resolution approving a professional services agreement between Superior Consulting Services LLC and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for a total expenditure not to exceed $350,000 for the 5-year contract duration of March 1st, 2019 to February 28th, 2024, to design, build, and support a new condemnation and assessments application.
Questions? Commissioner Cogill?
Thank you. I'm wondering if somebody could give me
Ralph, could you please come forward?
understanding of why we need this new system.
Chair Vita, Commissioner Cogill, the quick history is that back in the 1970s, when Dutch elm disease was kind of being first found in Minneapolis, one of the things that made our program unique since then is the condemnation of diseased trees on private property. And so as time has gone by, it also now involves condemning trees that might have oak wilt or also infested with emerald ash borer. Then next month, we'll be bringing forward the contract for tree removal and stump removal. And what happens is when we condemn these private trees, we use contractors to remove those trees if the homeowner does not or the resident does not do that themselves. So about 20 years ago, we kind of went from a very elaborate and convoluted Excel spreadsheet that was sort of mind-boggling to an actual software program that tracked the letters that go out to homeowners, the contractor prices, all the information that comes back and forth with that homeowner. And then 20 years has gone by and that whole software program is pretty unsustainable. It just, if something goes wrong, we're kind of in big trouble. But then over time, it became used by our finance department to assess for different assessments, for example, on parkways. So when we're done with our part of it, it moves over to finance, and then finance uses that portion of it to collect the fees that people owe, but also to collect different assessments that might be beyond trees. So it's kind of has a dual purpose now where it's going to benefit both the finance department and the forestry department. The funding for it is also being done through what's called the Park Acquisition Improvement Fund, and there's a little explanation of that. But essentially, the assessments that we collect for doing all these trees over a period of time, that's been put in a separate fund for this purpose, to be able to upgrade the software when the time comes.
Thank you. So just to be clear, the dual, what is finance using currently? Are they using anything to document was it encroachments? Is that correct?
Chair Vito and Commissioner Kogel, the application is for special assessments. So it's tree removal from private property trees, parkway paving assessments. So when I come to you at the end of the year and you have the listing of all the assessments, that report is being generated off of this software program.
Gotcha.
And just to clarify, we charge an administrative fee that's added to the assessment. And the administrative fee is what's being held separately, and which is funding the new program.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Forney?
Thank you, Chair Vito. I'm not on this committee, but in a lot of ways, the question I have really relates to both resolutions. We have a body of information of where we've had to make these assessments. And we also have a body of information of where there's been hardship. And I don't know how to frame it, but something, how we might be able to see, is there a pattern? Is there where maybe underserved communities are more in need of the hardship? Anyway, I'm just trying to, as we transfer that information, if possibly putting whatever, another column, sounding so simplistic on this, but a way that maybe we can learn from this information, that are there areas that are more impacted, being more assessed, being in need of more of a hardship. Anyway, I just feel like there's some body of information that we can learn from, and is there a need, a greater need, to maybe offer more assistance to those areas and more community outreach. Anyway, I just feel there is something there, and so I'd really appreciate if we could somehow merge these two into this new system.
Chair Vito, Commissioner Forney, right now it's very few people that actually do ask about that. And
The
right now,
hardship, the hardship part, okay.
Even sometimes nobody in an entire year will go by and no one asks about it. But if we needed to, we could track where those are, because there's just so few of those that ask.
It just, whatever, it just seems to me that there might be, this could be a learning moment.
Commissioner Vito and Chair Vito, Commissioner Forney, I am going to be starting some work on that this year based on some conversations that I've already had with the Regulatory Services Department at the City of Minneapolis, and some of the programs that they're looking at putting in place on the city side. So we right now have the Special Assessment Deferment Program, which you'll have the resolution to confirm next. But they're also looking at the city. We definitely don't want a tree assessment to force a property owner out of their home. And there's some restrictions to homeowners when they have reverse mortgages that we're discovering, and different things. So that is something that I'm going to be working on this year, and bringing back some study reports to this board, and potentially requesting some different types of programs and services to be generated from that discussion.
Awesome, you're on it. Thank you, Julie.
Commissioner Musich?
Thank you, Chair Vito. I'm not on this committee, so I appreciate being given an opportunity to speak. Do we provide any information on the condemnation notice about this deferral program that is available?
Chair Vito, Commissioner Musich, right now that's not something that's provided, because it's really not something that's been kind of had a solidified program to really tell about.
Okay, but now that there is a program, will we be communicating that information to the public? Lovely. So for those people that can't hear that on TV, yes, we will be doing that. I also wanted to share with my colleagues that I had a long discussion about this particular topic with one of the council members that represents a similar area to myself. That's Councilmember Andrew Johnson, and he is aware that there is a large need and will continue to be one as we continue to work through the ash trees under Emerald Ash Borer on private property, that people are not only going to be incurring the cost of having to have a tree removed, but they are losing the benefits of that mature tree and may not be able to afford to plant a new one. And so, and so the city is looking into other ways that they can help encourage tree planting beyond just the tree trust lottery that happens every year, because that's a very small portion of trees, and we are losing hundreds of thousands of trees to this disease. So the city council is looking into that, since it is really more under their purview than it is ours, since we do focus on parks and not private property so much. So anyhow, I just wanted to let you guys know that the city council is aware that this is an issue, and they are trying to look into it for us. So thanks.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Resolution 2019-122, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'll move Resolution 2019-123, a resolution to adopt the City of Minneapolis Hardship Deferral Program for special assessments.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 2019-123, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned. I would ask the secretary to, the time being 7:12, to please take the roll for the Park Police Governance, Operations, and Oversight Committee.
Commissioner Musich.
Here. Sorry,
Commissioner
Chris.
Cogill.
Here.
Chair Vita.
Here.
You have a quorum. Oh, Commissioner French.
Here.
Sorry, you have a quorum.
I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an action item.
I'll move Resolution 2019-124, resolution approving State of Minnesota joint powers agreements with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board on behalf of the Park Police Department.
Any questions?
I would like a short presentation on what this all entails.
Good evening, Chair Vita, Commissioner Cogill. We have a secure connection with the Minnesota Department of Public Safety that allows us access to both state and national criminal history and criminal justice data. In addition, through that platform, we are also able to connect electronically with the court system for the purpose of filing electronic complaints, electronically filing search warrants, and filing Minnesota state accident reports. In order to maintain that secure connection with the state, we require a joint powers agreement. The joint powers agreement in front of you replaces a joint powers agreement that was nearly the same, that expired the end of January. So this joint powers agreement, which lasts 5 years, allows us to continue that secure connection for us to do our job through the state of Minnesota Department of Public Safety.
And what, you said that it was nearly the same as the last joint powers agreement. What, is there anything notable that has changed that you can think of?
Chair Vita, Commissioner Cogill, no, the changes have been really very minor and mostly updating staff contacts.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Meyer?
I was just curious, what happened after it expired? Like, do they no longer have access to it right now? It's because it expired in January, right? So it's been a month.
Chair Vita, Commissioner Meyer,
The Department of Public Safety, because they did not get us the new joint powers agreement until virtually the day that the agreement expired, has agreed, as long as we're moving this forward, to continue our service.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Resolution 2019-124, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. So our next item is our Park Police Officer Award of the Year, and we already have Chief Fajardo here, so you have the floor.
Chair Vita, committee members, thank you. Every year since 2007, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board has recognized one park police officer as its Officer of the Year. I'd like to acknowledge Lieutenant Noble, who's in the audience today. Lieutenant Noble is the patrol unit commander. He oversees all of our patrol services, and he is the supervisor of the officer we're going to talk about in just a moment. I also want to thank many of the members of the police department who have come up tonight to show their support to their colleague. I know that support means quite a bit. Now I'd like to invite up Officer John Archer. So as part of your background material, I've attached the citation for Officer Archer's Officer of the Year Award, but for the audience and for the people who might be watching at home, I'd like to just take a moment to read that citation. Committee members, John Archer has been selected as the 2018 Park Police Officer of the Year. During 2018, John Archer, a 5-year veteran of the Park Police Department, was assigned to patrol duties on the night shift for parks located primarily in southwest Minneapolis. In this capacity, Officer Archer has worked tirelessly to ensure safe parks and recreation programs. Officer Archer was recommended for this award by one of his colleagues, who wrote, "Officer Archer represents the department and the entire park organization very well. He's an example of the ideal park police officer, intelligent, patient, respectful, and hardworking. Officer Archer responds to nearly every call with textbook response. He does not cut corners, as he is meticulous at completing each call the proper way, even if it means doing a lot more work. Officer Archer has also trained 3 new officers this past year. This is a task which can be challenging and add to one's workload. Throughout 2018, Officer Archer received several notes of appreciation. In one case, an Abbott Northwestern hospital paramedic wrote, "Recently, an officer brought in a guy that was found to be intoxicated at Loring Park. Officer Archer was not only sympathetic with the patient, he was also very compassionate and friendly with the patient and staff." In another case, the park director wrote, "Just sending a quick note to say thanks to Officer Archer for stopping in at Wyndham South. My staff mentioned last night what a nice officer that guy is." Some examples of Officer Archer's outstanding work in 2018 include, on July 23rd, Officer Archer safely apprehended a Minnesota Department of Corrections fugitive armed with a loaded handgun at Stevens Square Park. On August 8th, Officer Archer located and arrested 6 suspects armed with weapons involved in an aggravated robbery that occurred at Lake Harriet. On November 4th, Officer Archer was flagged down on a possible overdose. Archer quickly assessed the situation and administered Narcan, which likely saved the patient's life. Through everyday hard work, professionalism, and skill, Officer Archer has furthered the mission of the Minneapolis Park Police Department. He is committed to serving Minneapolis parks, in developing and maintaining positive relationships to improve park safety and solve crime problems. Respectfully submitted, Chief Jason Ohado. I told Officer Archer that he didn't have to prepare any remarks, but that commissioners may have a question for him. So we stand for questions if you have any.
I don't have a question, but I want to say thank you so much for your service. We really do appreciate it. And also, no one can ever say that our park police can't run. I held my head down for 2 seconds and there was a half a room full of park police. I had no idea where they came from. So you have a very supportive group, obviously, of people here who wanted to see you be recognized and acknowledged for the great work that you've done. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Keep doing great work and keep training people in to do great work. We need that more than ever. In the remarks, it said you trained 3 people in last year, I believe. So we only hope that those people do the great things that you've done in the 5 years that you've been here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
President Board.
Thank you, Chair Vita. I just want to congratulate you, Officer Archer, and accepting this award, which I am sure is on behalf of all the women and men that you stand shoulder to shoulder with every day. One of the things the chief and I have known each other for a number of years, but we've had the opportunity to have more and more conversations in the last year and a half now. And one of the things that is really apparent of your colleagues and your department chief is you have a very when you look at everybody that comes to work every day for the park system, your team and your colleagues face a set of challenging and unique burdens that a lot of our staff don't face every day. And so many of our staff in your department and outside of your department do literally put their lives on the line every day to make sure that people's enjoyment of our amenities, that they can enjoy our amenities. And I would argue that a lot of our rec center staff do that same thing, a lot of our maintenance staff, but in a very unique way. And one of the reasons why we wanted to actually create this committee is to really kind of create space for, in some of the conversations I've had with officers, in my time, there's a real effort for continuous improvement through the department that the board doesn't always see, admittedly. And a lot of times when we have discussion around self-improvement of the department, it comes on the heels of something we may not always be proud of. And I think we don't always take the time to give the recognition for the work that you folks do every single day. When we do a lot of that self-improvement in every other division, we highlight the good work very often. And I think this board shares the goals of the department to be continuously improving, but I don't think we always do as good of a job of recognizing the incredible work that everybody does day in and day out, puts themselves in danger, doesn't ask for any recognition outside of it. So it's really excited to be able to take this space and just recognize that. So Officer Archer, I know you're accepting this on behalf of all the women and men that you work with, but thank you so much for your service this year and for choosing to have a career with the Minneapolis Park Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner French?
One of my favorite shows on TV is The Wire, and they kind of document what goes on in the Baltimore Police Department. And there's this term that they use when somebody's a great cop, when somebody's doing above and beyond their duty. They say he's real police. So you catching a fugitive in a park with a gun, that's real police work. So I just want to say thank you and continue the job that you're doing, continue to train the guys that you're training and the young ladies that you may be training, and keep up the good work. Thank you for all the service that you're doing.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I would ask for a motion. Adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you all.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.
Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Being
Thank you all.
7:24, I would like to call to order Recreation Committee. Can I have a roll?
Commissioner Forney.
Here.
Commissioner Musich.
Present.
Chair French.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, I would seek approval of the agenda. Have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Say all in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say no. No abstentions, thank you. I'd like to seek approval I would like a motion to move approval of the minutes,
There's no minutes.
no minutes, all right.
But I
So-
would make a motion for our action item, if you would entertain such a thing at this
I
time.
would entertain.
I'd like to move item 2019-125, a resolution approving the grant submission for up to $74,000 to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Federal Recreational Trail Program to be used for the purchase of snowmaking equipment for use in winter recreational programming at Theodore Worth Regional Park.
Is there any discussion? Commissioner Meyer, sorry.
I'm not on this committee, but in the staff report, they say that they want to have this brought to the full board.
Yes.
So I think now is the appropriate time for me to ask my question. First, it says that the grant for this is due on February 29th, which I think is unlikely because there's no February 29th this year. But I take it that it'll be due soon. So I wanted to ask, first of all, about the nature of
Can I
this.
stop you first?
Yep.
Would it be the best if we just move this take a vote to move this to the whole board and in the interest of time?
No.
We should do.
We should have discussion.
Okay, all right, I just trying to figure it out.
Yep.
All right, so, I'm sorry.
Can we bring Cliff forward? I wanted to ask about the nature of the grant that we're approving an application for, and wanted to know, like, if the DNR weren't to approve this grant, what other type of things might they spend this type of money on?
Chair French, Commissioner Meyer, the Federal Recreation Trail Program grant is a fairly new grant, to my understanding. In Minnesota, it's been offered since 2014. And since 2014, we've applied 3 separate times. Two separate times and received grants for both of those occasions. So we received grants in 2014 for expansion of the single-track trails near Brownie Lake. And then we received snowmaking grants in 2016 for additional snowmaking at Theodore Worth. This grant money is typically, when you look across the $2.5 million that's given approximately across the state of Minnesota, therefore things for special trail type of projects. I think about looking, City of Duluth received grants for some of their single track development. Anoka County Parks one year received money for snow grooming equipment. So it seems to be specialty type trail projects that are being identified. There is a group that DNR hosts that they screen the applications, but again, it looks to be for specialty type projects, which is similar to what Lopin is applying for, in this case, additional snowmaking equipment. It's not something that we have other capital funding available for them to use for this type of purchase. So it seems like a good grant application grant funding to use for the type of equipment that they're wanting to purchase and use at our regional park. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Meyer?
Part of it, like when federal agencies like the DNR consider grants like this, does it make it less likely that other grants get approved? Like, did they kind of consider, we gave, this much money to this state or this entity, and so we're not going to approve the next one? I'm just wondering because, when we are applying for grants like this, we kind of might have a sense that it's free, but I want to know if it's excluding other possibilities.
So what aren't we applying for maybe would be a good, if I could use that term. Chair French, Commissioner Meyer, it appears that we're receiving funding about every 2 years. We received funding in 2014 and 2016. 2018, we did not receive funding. So I don't know if there's a particular excluding. Looking at the cities and the counties and actual DNR programs that applied for grant funding, it was spread out throughout the state. Again, if we think about park projects where we have capital funding or rehabilitation funding available to help with trail or pathway work, we can use that funding for that. In the case of single track, there are not a lot of grant programs that we can apply to for fundings specifically to use at single track. So we've used this grant application for helping with single track. And again, looking at across the state, what has been awarded for specialty equipment, it looks like you know what the LOPIT is applying for meets that requirement. If I think about projects that we have ongoing, needs that we have within the regional trail system, oftentimes we can assign them to other capital projects that we do. For example, the Chain of Lakes Master Plan, we had work that we did at Bedamakaska and Lake Harriet on the regional trail. We had capital dollars, regional trail funding that we're able to use for ADA improvements. I think at Theodore Worth, again, when we look at that snowmaking program there, it's hard for us to find other capital funding to use to purchase that type of equipment. So from staff's perspective, we're supportive of using this grant funding for those specialty type of equipment.
And then last question, were you able to find information about the energy intensity of these snow creating machines, like how much they would be using?
Chair French, Commissioner Meyer, no, I was not. However, one of the things, right now, within the park system, we have 11 snow guns. 4 of those 11 snow guns that are currently in use are older and are fairly inefficient. They don't use water wisely, and hence the pump systems, et cetera, are older. They're not they don't use electrical energy efficiently either. The new guns that we are purchasing, or that would be purchased with this grant money, are more efficient. They use less water to make more snow, and they operate more electrically efficient. So the good news is that as these older snow guns, snowmaking equipment become well used, and in the application that was attached to the board action, it talks about some of these older equipment date back to 2006 and 2007, you know, have excess of 5,000 hours. So we have an opportunity to work those out of the group of snowmaking, or the equipment that they're using for snowmaking, and put more efficient snowmaking guns in their for their use. I'll find out some information about electrical usage and feed that to the board here.
Thank you. So I am skeptical about this, not skeptical enough to oppose it, but I do, you know, want to scrutinize these things, because, you know, if this was coming directly to the park board as an allocation from us, I would oppose it as, you know, something I don't really believe we should be investing in. You know, the same way I don't think, you know, they should have luxurious golf courses in like Arizona or something. Like, we're trying to, you know, change, you know, the natural environment in a really energy intensive way. But, you know, that said, I'm not skeptical enough to oppose it today, but in the future, I do want to you know, learn more about how these grants work, and if they, if there might be other types of things that we should be applying for instead. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Forney.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair French, I don't know why this seems really silly to be talking about this snowmaking on a day like today. But we all know that it's not always the case, and in particular, the Lopet wasn't exactly the full event that we all wanted, so I'm very much in favor of this. I just want to mention that my brother was on the cross-country team, and this is where they competed, was in Theodore Worth. I downhill skied there. I'm sorry, I can't remember if there were days that we didn't have snow at all. That was a little while ago. But can you tell me how many snowmaking areas there are in the metropolitan area?
Chair French, Commissioner Forney, for Nordic skiing, there are 3 particular areas within the metro area that are used. 2 are owned by Three Rivers Park, Elm Creek Park, and then Highland. In the case of Highland, probably is the most comparable to French. They make approximately 6 kilometers of snowmaking loop for Nordic skiing. And they have about 15 snowmaking guns at their disposal to do that 6 kilometer, or excuse me, 5.5, 6 kilometer. With this particular grant application, I just happened to look, and they have 11, at Worth we have 11 now, we had 4, we'll be at 15, so we'll be similar to Highland, we'll be comparable to Highland. But again, to answer your question, there are 3 sites, and Worth happens to be one of them, and it's a very popular site. Again, staff support this grant application because of really the World Cup race that's coming next year. Those are things that we're trying to give them the best resources possible to make sure that that event is successful.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of this. Many friends of mine are huge cross-country skiers, and they just are in awe of the fact that we are one of 3, areas in the metropolitan area. And last night, of course, when we were at the superintendent's reception, it was just packed. So we are fulfilling a huge need and desire, and so I'm very much in favor of this. Thank you for bringing it forward.
All right, Commissioner Bourne.
Thank you, Chair French. I'm also supportive of this when it comes to the full board, but I also share some of Commissioner Meyer's concerns and just kind of want to make sure that we have an eye open to the future. And I would suggest the direction that, very similar to what we do with the Hennepin County Youth Sports Grants, where a menu of options is provided to commissioners. Last thing I want to do is bring this back to the drawing board a few days before it's due. And so I think this is a good application for this year. I'd like to see the board have some input on where we're putting our attention in the future. I would also, and I just think it's hard to talk about snowmaking equipment without talking about climate change. And is this always going to be the best use of our resources? And if we're going to continue this as a value set, we're going to have to be buying more and more and more and using more and more and more water. And I just have some long-term sustainability concerns around that. But given the circumstances, I think I would encourage all my colleagues to support this for this cycle. But thank you, Chair French.
Thank you, President Bourne. I guess I have any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions? I guess the questions I have is what kind of machines are these? Are they? You said I guess you kind of answered a little bit with the efficiency of it. Are these some of the most efficient machines that we can buy? Are we using less energy with these machines, and how is that? How does that help with our environmental?
Because maybe Chair French, I thought maybe I just threw a couple images in the transfer drive here just so that you'd understand what's entailed in them. But basically, what you're seeing here is similar to what would be ordered by the Lopet. It's a typical snowmaking a piece of equipment. So what it is we have an irrigation system in place that provides water. There's a 60 amp cord that goes back to a electrical system that we have within the golf course. And if you see on the side here, there's a pump, so we take the water in, it pressurizes it, sends it through a series of nozzles, and that water comes into the snow gun at about 48 to 46 degrees. And then if we have temperatures that are 28 degrees or less, we can produce snow. Again, the snow guns that were being purchased are new. They have the latest technology for nozzle sizes, for efficient pumps, and again, the four that would be ordered would be more efficient than the oldest four that we have, that they're using at Worth right now.
What happens to the 4 old machines? There's some type of resale value to those?
So they're not taking them out of their snow gun, Chair French, they're not taking them out of commission. There's actually replacement nozzles they can do, so as they wear out, they'll try to keep them in operation. Next year, when they have the World Cup event, they'll be using all of those snow guns to make sure that they have proper snow depth and this event can happen.
Any other discussion? I see none. I'd like to put this resolution up for a vote. All in favor of resolution 2019-121, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All abstain? Thank you. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor of adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstentions? No? Thank you. So adjourned.
I'd like to call back to order the regular meeting of the Minneapolis and Park and Recreation Board.
We've got operations.
I know. We have some folks that are waiting. Before we move forward with Resolution 2019-125, we had some folks that came in right towards the end of open time. They've asked if they could have a minute to address the board. If there's no objection, I would reopen open time to give Mr. Mohammed 60 seconds to address the board. Is there any objection? Seeing none, Mr. Mohammed, thank you for waiting so patiently. If you would state your name and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record, you have 60 seconds to address the board.
Got it.
Take your time, bro.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Mohammed, and I live on 1316 Circle Terrace. And today, let me start off by thanking the Minneapolis Board of Recreation for allowing me to voice my concerns. Let's see. I'm here in support of Salam Cultural Center. It's located on 3141 Central Avenue Northeast, Minneapolis. Salam Cultural Center is a place where community members can gather for educational events, counseling, and many more things. The problem we face is securing the proper parking for our multi-cultural purpose center, and we have been informed on numerous occasions that people just don't feel comfortable dropping off their kids and for next to the curb because there's no parking. Like I said, it's located on Central, and Central is a very, very busy street, if you've ever been on it. As a volunteer, I go to the University of Minnesota, and I volunteer often. And I want to ensure the safety of everyone that walks through those doors.
You could just conclude your comments in the next 10 seconds.
Got it. So, like I said, I'm a volunteer. I come in sometimes, help out the kids, and without the parking, I got my car towed at least twice. And that's about it, really. But
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I'm going to refer you to Assistant Superintendent Schroeder. If there are any written comments that you weren't able to get in your time period, you can also give them to Mr. Schroeder, and he can make sure that the board gets a copy of your comments. Thank you for, we're sorry the storm kept you up, but thank you all for waiting patiently, and thank you for braving the storm, and drive safe. I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of amending the agenda to add Resolution 2019-125 from the Recreation Committee. Is there a motion? It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there any discussion on a motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, I would ask Secretary Ringgold to take the roll.
Commissioner Musich.
Aye.
Commissioner Cogill. Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Vita.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
President Bourne.
Aye.
You have 7 ayes, 2 absent.
Thank you, Secretary Ringgold. The rules have been suspended. I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda to include Resolution 2019-125 from the Recreation Committee. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment of the agenda? Seeing none, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the agenda is amended. Chair French, I would entertain a motion on Resolution 2019-125.
The board, okay, 120. The resolution 2019-125, the resolution approving the grant submission for up to $74,000 to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Federal Recreational Trail Program to be used for the purchase of snowmaking equipment for the use in the winter recreational programming at Theodore Wirth Regional Park.
Motion has been moved. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on 2019-125? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned. Chair Misich.
On behalf of the Operations Committee, Operations and Environment Committee, I would request that the Secretary please call the roll.
Commissioner Cogill.
Present.
Commissioner Meyer.
Present.
Commissioner French.
Here.
Chair Musich.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We have no minutes to approve today, but I do have an agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda at this time.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion passes. We have a brief study report item this evening, and we've been graciously joined by Assistant Superintendent Barrick. Take it away.
Good evening, Chair Musich, members of the committee. I will be as quick as I can because I stand between you and going home. But as the Pesticide Advisory Committee is nearing their recommendations, we wanted to take this opportunity to share some of the background on the Park Board's Integrated Pest Management Program and kind of some of the background on our pesticide use. And so what I've done is there was a presentation given to the board in 2017. I've merged that presentation with several of the presentations that the Pesticide Advisory Committee has received from staff initially. And so I have quite a few slides, but I'll try to move through them as quick as possible. Just a brief background, for 20 years, the Park Board has been focused on reducing the use of pesticides and started with an approved integrated pest management plan back in 1999. Then they took some procedures to make sure that all park keepers became licensed pesticide applicators in 2000, and then in 2006, an IPM work team was established internally, and in 2007, there was a Sustainable Lands Practices Work Group that presented a final report that ultimately led to, as I understand it, in 2008, a revised IPM policy, which is our current policy. In 2016, the board took the action to eliminate the use of glyphosate in neighborhood parks. And then, of course, in January 2019, this board took a moratorium on the use of glyphosate throughout the park system and established the Community and Technical Advisory Committee known as the Pesticide Advisory Committee. So that's just a brief history. For 20 years, the Park Board's been working on this. Integrated pest management, what that is it's a strategy that focuses on the long-term prevention and suppression of pest problems with minimum impact on human health and the environment and non-target organisms. So this is not a predetermined set of practices necessarily, but rather a stepwise gradual procedure that you would use in addressing a pest. And you employ a combination of approaches, and I'll walk through those. And then it really relies on an understanding of the biology of the pests that you're trying to address and taking steps to address that before using chemicals. And once using chemicals, using the least toxic, most target specific. The steps that we go through, you look at prevention. The prevention would be plant species selection Cultural would be your practices of mulching and irrigation. Are those practices done in a way that prevents pests? Mechanical would be your mowing, your pulling, and using tools. Biological would be introducing other organisms that would compete with the pest and try to outcompete it and minimize its damage. And then chemical, of course, is using chemicals. As you know, the Park Board is a diverse landscape. Each of these landscapes has different use and different expectations of that use, and that is our challenge, I guess. And so when we think about that, we manage those landscapes across 2 divisions and 4 different departments, with asset management providing the maintenance in the neighborhood and regional parks, buildings, formal gardens, athletic fields, beaches, pools, parking lots, et cetera. Environmental management in the natural areas and the bodies of water, golf on the golf courses and recreation, and then forestry, the park trees and the boulevard trees. So our IPM in action, as it currently stands, one of the things that's important to frame is the term pesticide. The term pesticide refers to all active ingredients that address a pest. And so it's not just insecticides or herbicides, it's rodenticides, it's fungicides, it's all of those specific. It even includes disinfectants, attractants, plant defoliants. Those are all things considered pesticides, and that's just an important framework to have with the terminology. Since 2008, we've done an analysis. There's been a significant reduction in our use of liquid pesticides and herbicides since the adoption of that IPM, and we employ a variety of methods to do that, and I'll walk you through each of these areas real quick. So one of the reason we have to manage pests is primarily for certain pests, it's public safety. When it comes to vegetation, it's the Minnesota Noxious Weed Law, which does require us as landowners to eradicate certain species for public health, things like poison ivy, and things like that. Then there's control list things like buckthorn, where we can't sell it, we can't spread it, but we do, so it's advised that we remove it. And then there's restricted noxious weeds, which also can't be sold or transported, and then specially regulated plants. So we're subject to that law. Our current pesticide use amongst, asset management is for noxious weeds, plant health issues in formal gardens, maintaining turf standards, and rodents in buildings. In environmental management, it's again noxious weeds and invasive species. In golf, it's to maintain the turf standard for the game of golf. And in forestry, there's no internal, we don't use any pesticides in the forestry operation. However, we do permit homeowners in the case of fungicides and insecticides for Dutch elm disease and emerald ash borer. So in forestry, the primary approach we use is cultural with our species diversity. We plant, that's something we've done with the canopy replacement plan. We've really focused on expanding our species diversity, which makes us more resilient to a pest. We have design standards in place for soil volumes. That helps with the health. And then sanitation is our mechanical method. So anytime we have a diseased or infested tree, you learned earlier tonight, we condemn even private trees. But the idea is to remove those trees as soon as possible so that they aren't a source for infection or infestation. We've done some work in biological controls with the emerald ash borer and the MDA. We've introduced pilot wasps, and that's been shown to be effective in managing that beetle, the ash borer population. And then, of course, with chemicals, as I said, we don't have an active program where we inject trees, but we do permit people should they choose that route. In neighborhood parks, most of our cultural stuff is mulching of beds. Mechanical, we use hand pulling, weed whipping, mowing, smothering and burning of weeds, trapping and removal of pests or rodents. We don't have a lot going on in the biological front in terms of neighborhood park pests that we're managing, but in chemical, we have used vinegar solutions. We've trialed that in some locations, and then rodenticide applications by contractors for rats and mice and stuff in the buildings. And of course, glyphosate has been banned since 2016 in neighborhood parks, with the one exception being Loring Park, where we had an active project to manage cattails. Some of the things we've tried and we've shared in neighborhood parks in the past, like I mentioned, the brush torch of weeds in paved areas, weed whipping, hand pulling, wood chips, and then we've tried alternative herbicides. So these are things like Adios, which is sodium-based, Avenger, citric-based, and Somerset all down concentrate. And the pictures there kind of give you an idea. A lot of these alternatives are more costly in both the cost of the product and then the labor that it takes, because in order for it to be really efficient or effective, it takes multiple treatments consistently over and over. So that is some of the background of things we've tried. When we go to the regional parks, it's very similar to our neighborhood parks in that, we mulch, we pull, we mow, we do those things, we trap things. We do use some, it's in the regional system, so we do have some use of herbicides for the control of noxious weeds. And in the rare case, like Victory Memorial last year, where we did use an herbicide, weed and feed, that included an herbicide for the aesthetic restoration of the memorial. And then we will do rodenticide applications as well. Things we've tried in the regional system, in 2009 to 2011, we tried a Green Guardian, which was a molasses extract, and that was applied on the north side of the drive. And you can see the pictures at the bottom are the day of treatment, 3 days after treatment, 8 days after treatment. And so, again, you'd have to consistently apply this. And again, we've tried Adios, Avenger, and then horticultural vinegars. So when we go to formal gardens, which there's a higher aesthetic standard, but we typically have gardeners on site, so we're able to do a little bit more labor-wise. So culturally, we're removing infected plants because we're present there enough that we can identify it early, we can get things out of there. We avoid susceptible materials. Hand pulling, weed whipping, mowing, smothering, and burning. At the Rose Garden, we hand remove the Japanese beetles. That's a daunting task, but we have volunteers that help a lot with that. Biological controls, we've introduced some predatory insects in different areas and seen some efficacy there. And then limited use of herbicides, primarily to control noxious weeds. And then limited use of fungicides and insecticides. Things that they've also tried in the formal gardens would be solarization, burning, vinegar solutions, manual removal, and our new horticultural supervisor, Kate Ryan, kind of put this together, walking through the pros and the cons of these approaches, and this was shared with the Pesticide Advisory Committee. Solarization or smothering, this is a technique that can be used in large beds or areas being cleared and prepped. So there's an element of planning that has to go into it, and this would be covering an area in plastic and leaving it for a season, ideally with the theory being that the temperature would kill the seed bank. We've noticed it's not very effective on Canada thistle, but we've tried it. And so it's low cost. The labor's not too intense. But it does require some planning. It's ineffective against certain species because their seed banks can out-survive it. And it's not necessarily usable in confined or formally planted areas. This is better for like a wide open, complete restoration. Burning, this technique can be used on hardscapes. Most effectively, you get quick results. This is a blowtorch burning the weeds off. It is labor intensive because you do as soon as the top half of the plant dies, the root system will resprout. You have to hit it again and keep doing that until you wear the plant out until it gives up. Horticultural vinegars and solutions, this is something we've tested, but we're not utilizing it entirely at this point in time. It's an alternative to other herbicides. It is labor intensive, again, due to the repeat applications. There are some safety concerns with the toxicity levels that you have to get to. Some of their exposure can be just as dangerous as a synthetic herbicide. And then soil health is something else to take into account. So using a vinegar, you can start to affect the pH of the soil over time, which could have an effect on which will have an effect on the plant growth. Hand pulling and timed cutting back. This is ideal because it avoids chemicals altogether. There's an instant visual improvement, and it prevents the seed bank from building up if you can stay on top of it. But it's labor intensive. And some of the plants, again, just as if you were to burn the top of the plant off, if you pull it off without getting the root system will resprout. You'd have to hit it again and keep pulling the plant until eventually the root system runs out of stored energy and gives So if we shift to natural areas, so culturally we use plants that aren't susceptible. Ideally, we species diversity, all those things are taken into account. Mechanically, we've done prescribed burns, we've done manual and mechanical removal. Biologically, I'll go through some of these examples of pests that we've released to outcompete the pests we're going after, and of course we've used goats. And then chemically, we do use a limited use of herbicides for noxious weeds and invasive weeds, and most of our chemical use comes in ecological restoration work. So in the biological controls that we've tried in natural areas, we have a success case in the purple loosestrife where we introduced a weevil that was able to help control purple loosestrife, which was an invasive, spotted knapweed and leafy spurge. This was working with MDA with a root feeding weevil in 2003, and control is working on all those sites at Cedar Lake and Victory Prairie. And then Eurasian water milfoil control research with the University of Minnesota. No real control to date, but we think that's because of the fish are eating the pests that we want to, the good pests. Prescribed burns, just we're in an urban area, so these are tricky. It can be done, but it takes kind of some luck and some really good weather in our favor, wind speeds, humidity levels, air temperatures, and then also working with the DNR and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency over air quality issues, and then working around special events too. So if we have a burn and there's bike to work day, that happened to us in the past. We were doing a controlled burn while it was bike to work day, and so it made for a tricky situation. The goats, so we've had the goats for 2 years, they're coming back. Everybody likes the goats. The goats work very similar to a lawnmower. We're using them to manage buckthorn, honeysuckle, and other invasives, but the goats, they don't know that, so they eat everything. And so we have to continue to monitor these two sites to see, you know, are the goats, is the native vegetation getting a leg up even with the goats, knocking everything back. So we'll be going back to Worth for the 3rd year on the 2 sites that we've done up there. We did 1 year at Cedar Beach the first year, and you can kind of go back there now and see that 2 years after the goats decimated that, what does it look like? And then you can go to Worth and kind of see what 2 years of treatment look like. So switching quickly to golf, I'll speak on their behalf, I guess. Hope Tyrese doesn't mind. I did work with the golf folks on this. Prevention, they utilize different turf varieties, and that they're looking to always reduce their no-mow varieties and no-play areas. So each golf course is about 110 acres. If you think about what they're really intently managing are the tee boxes, the fairway, and the green. So it's not all of that 110 acres under this intense management, but certainly the greens and the tee boxes are probably the 2 most intensely managed, with the fairways followed, and then outside of play areas really kind of left to, you know, natural ways. So they do a lot of annual soil testing. They're doing aeration, top dressing, overseeding, trying to create a healthy turf and keep it low maintenance. Frequent mowing to prevent seed dispersal, and then the pesticides they are using as needed basis on an as needed basis for the turf standards on the greens, fairways, and tee boxes. Some of the work that they've done in golf in the past few years is, again, introducing more no-mow areas in an effort to reduce both the carbon it takes, but then also let native plants reestablish. And then something we should be very proud of is the fact that we have 5 of our 7 golf courses, counting the Worth Par 3, have been certified by the Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary. And what that entails is looking at the golf course as a whole, as an ecological system, coming up with an ecological management plan, and then enacting those pieces of it. So to have 5 of our courses in that program is something to definitely highlight. When we switch then to the athletic fields, this is very similar to golf, but a little bit different, because primarily for us, it's not the turf in the athletic fields, it becomes the ag lime for the actual infield and the warning tracks. And so using annual testing, regular irrigation, aeration, top dressing, overseeding, frequent mowing, all the same things as golf, and then herbicide use as needed to maintain mostly the ag lime, sometimes the turf, and that depends. And so the 3 fields we're talking about are Boston, Neiman, and Parade, where these are our premier athletic fields that are permitted out. Some things that we've tried there are burning, vinegar, and manual removal. And similar analysis here. Again, this was shared with the Pesticide Advisory Committee. With burning, we get quick results. It's okay to use on the ag lime. You really can't burn the rocks. But again, labor intensive, some safety concerns around fire, and cannot be used on asphalt, and on concrete it's a little touch and go too. Horticultural vinegars, tested but not regularly used, similar deal, labor intensive, safety concerns, and soil health, but there's potential there. And then timed cutting, again, it avoids chemical use, it's an instant visual improvement, prevents seed bank buildup, but labor intensive, can trigger some plants to re-sprout and come back with vengeance, and then time sensitive too, so your timing has to be right with seeding. So another piece that was shared with the Pesticide Advisory Committee that has not been shared with the board that I wanted you to see was in 2017 and 18, we've mapped all of the areas where we have used glyphosate, and you'll notice that it's all in the regional system with the exception of the Loring Pond cattail treatments. And something I should mention about the cattails too, one of the things that was, if you're familiar with the history, the South Bay was really covered in cattails. Like, I think the estimates were in the 70 to 80% range of cattails covering the pond. The most effective treatment we did there was actually cutting the cattails, raising the water level and drowning them out, and that knocked a lot of it back. And then for the past 3 years, we were using a glyphosate-based product called Aquaneat, which is approved for use around water, and they were doing stem treatments to knock that back. And so that was the glyphosate use in Loring Park. And then there's the glyphosate use in the golf courses and the regional systems. And so with that, I will take your questions if you have any, but I should add that the Pesticide Advisory Committee has met 5 times. We have 3 more scheduled, including next Thursday. They are now into working groups focused on these different landscape types, and they're starting to come up with some recommendations. So we have a recommendations board collecting their ideas, and I do think we're on pace to have initial recommendations by April 4th. If the weather holds out, we've lost our chair with the snow plowing. He's been very busy, but the committee has met a couple times, but he'll be back as soon as that.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's about the goats, because I love the goats. Well, I know we contract this service out. What's the feasibility of the park board actually having their own herd of goats and having kids taking care of them? And we could do something with I'm just throwing it out there.
Chair Musich, Commissioner French. So that would be we don't manage livestock currently, right? And so.
And it's illegal.
Yes, the hooved animals in the city. We do have, the contractor has to get a permit every year to bring in hooved animals, and then it's only for a certain duration of time. So there's that hurdle of getting a variance to allow us to have hooved animals within the city somewhere. There is the actual management. I certainly don't know much about managing livestock. My daughter wishes I knew how to manage a horse, but that's not going to happen.
But it's possible, though. I mean, what I'm saying is, because this would be a great.
Sure, it's possible, but I think it'd be a significant investment.
Maybe not now, but think about it 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Have some kids managing goats in our parks, like some shepherd handles and all that stuff.
The shepherd is key. That is one of the reasons why our goats were, we didn't have any escaped goats like some other cities.
Commissioner Kogel?
Thank you, Chair Musich. Couple of questions. I don't want to go way down the rabbit hole on all of this, but okay, first, is chlorine considered a pesticide by the park board?
Yes.
You mentioned swimming pools within the.
I think you could consider chlorine a pesticide.
Yes, it is.
Is that being considered within the scope of this?
No.
Okay.
No, the chlorine has not come up at the advisory committee, no.
Okay, sounds good. And then the larger question that I have is regarding, I suppose, within the scope of this, within the scope of the advisory committee and what recommendations are going to be coming out, are we considering then the kind of next steps? Let's say, for example, if we're suddenly not, there's nothing that's going to be effective on certain turf that is within this, that isn't glyphosate-based. Is it a separate planning process to determine what other use would have to go into that space? So for example, maybe like I'm thinking of the rose garden, if we have to use glyphosate to keep up the look of that space, then do we have to consider like changing that space? Kind of the next step if that was the case.
Chair Musich, Commissioner Kogel. So the Rose Garden's a tricky example because we have staff there, and what we're trying to do is work with you, like get funding, raise some money to get funding for interns, and it's just a higher intensity of management, and because it's so ornamental. So that I think that you could say, you know, could we get by without glyphosate at the Rose Garden? Probably, because we have the staffing there, because it's so formal, like that type of thing. When you think about the majority of our glyphosate use coming from ecological restoration work, and then the concept of would you have to if you can't reinvest in the landscape and get it to a natural setting, you know, what are your alternatives to glyphosate? There's always alternatives. Some of them are worse.
Harsher chemicals.
That's
right. So I suppose what I'm getting at is, let's say there's no alternative to maintain the vision of what the space is supposed to be.
Right.
Then there would be, I guess, an additional planning process to determine what the space should aesthetically look like or what use should be there. Is that
yes, I would agree with that.
And that would not be, that's not something that's within the scope of the current Community Advisory Committee, to be clear.
They're looking to research viable alternatives, and so I think if they identify an alternative and they would rule it viable or not, I think long term, if the committee recommends staying on, those would be things they could tackle.
I see. So if there was maybe a recommendation that there was no viable alternative, right, then there would be a new set of questions, I suppose, about the use of it.
Sure.
Okay, great. Is there a definition from the EPA of what a pest is? Or from anybody?
We took that definition of pesticide from the EPA. And I don't know off the top of my head, right, you know, if they define pest. I think they would define it as anything that's causing damage to a plant or infrastructure or anything along those lines.
Cool, thanks.
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you for this presentation. It was helpful. Is it available to the public? Is it hosted anywhere on our website?
Not currently. Pieces, so as I said, four presentations have been given to the Pesticide Advisory Committee, and pieces of those presentations are here. And those are posted online, but I can have this posted. If you think that's helpful, we can post that to the Parks and Pesticide webpage.
I think it would be. I was able to attend the first few meetings, but not the last couple for the Pesticide Advisory Committee. I guess I just wanted to reiterate my hopes for it. I mean, I think we know, like, if we're willing to spend enough money, there's always an alternative. Like, we could always use the labor to manually remove everything. What I'm hoping to get from the committee is, you know, a strong analysis of the trade-offs, like how much it's going to cost us to keep the same level, or can we settle with like a somewhat different level? So that I hope they're able to produce that. I did have one other question that came up. So 5 of our golf courses are Audubon certified. I was curious why Hiawatha isn't.
Hiawatha is.
It wasn't on the list.
So Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, it was at one time on the certified list. That expired due to the changes. They have not gotten to the point of recertification. That's.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Maybe we could post a link to that particular section of this meeting on the pesticide page, so people could get not only the presentation but also the context of your words. Okay, wonderful. So we're going to look into a timestamp for everyone that couldn't hear what our communications director shared with us. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, great. We're adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Actually, look at the ladies. I live on the snow route.